Alright, it is time to talk about the tactical class in patch 7.2 Space Marine 2, his best perks, his best setups, and why he is currently the strongest class in the game, in my opinion. Now, the tactical really is blessed with just a tremendous amount of amazing perks. I'm going to go through them here first and then talk about his weapon combinations, because really the tactical is just blessed with options. That is the biggest thing about him. He has the largest number of primaries in the whole game. All of these are currently viable, and even like the weakest one here with the auto bolt rifle is still totally viable at the moment, which is pretty crazy to say because this thing used to be trash. Now, the plasma is, in my opinion, the strongest weapon for him currently, and the bolt carbine is like the only one that's really in competition for the plasma, but we'll get into these in a second here because first I want to talk about the perks. So we're going to start here with balanced distribution. Your primary weapon deals 10% more damage, but your secondary weapon deals 10% less damage. On this class, you use your primary a lot because you pretty much have infinite ammo with Emperor's Vengeance, or even now, if you're taking other perks, you still have things like Skilled Supplier for more ammunition. So really, you're just going to be spamming your primary shots pretty much all the time, and 10% less on your secondary weapon. I've never really felt this make like a huge difference at all. In fact, I hardly notice it whatsoever. And really, the only thing this might really affect, because if you're taking plasma, you're already taking a different perk anyways. We'll get into that in a second. But the heavy bolt pistol, this is pretty much what everybody's using now, and this one already does so much damage on headshots that you hardly notice a 10% decrease whatsoever, and the bolt pistol's kind of been power creeped, so people don't really touch this anyways. Now, the next perk here would be Plasma Boost. When plasma weapons are 30% overheated, their damage increases by 40%, and their charged shots use 1 less energy. This is just the perk you take when you're using plasma guns, and it's kind of lame. It only works for 2 guns, but hey, that's your primary and your secondary here, and that's really all you need it to be, because this just says you do more damage and you use less ammo, and that's really all you need a perk to do for your guns. So pretty much always take this if you're using plasma. This definitely dramatically increases your damage, and plasma tactical is really strong right now because of this perk on top of some of the reworked perks for plasma. And double plasma attack, it's just damn good. So Kraken Penetrator Rounds is the next perk on our list here. Bolt weapons penetrate 1 more enemy. I don't think this perk is really valuable at all. I've tried this out a lot. I've used it on pretty much every bolt gun he has, and I've never really seen a serious difference using this. It just doesn't really do anything, and most of the weapons you would use with it, like the heavy bolt rifle, they already have an excellent penetration value, and really this only makes like a very minor benefit sometimes against like a huge swarm of Minoras, so it's just not super useful. But what is super useful is Heightened Vigor. After a perfectly timed parry, block, or dodge, you deal 10% more melee and gun strike damage. You do not lose control upon taking heavy hits, and you cannot be knocked back for 10 seconds. This is pretty much the best version of a no knockback parry in the entire game, because you get more damage on top of not getting knocked back to deal that damage, and no knockback effects in this game are super valuable. Not getting knocked over is just amazing, because a lot of the things in this game that kill you, it's because they stun lock you or they knock you over when you're trying to do something to kill them, especially with things like Sword Warriors. So I pretty much always take this on him. Alternatively, you could take something like Relentless Pursuit. After a gun strike, range damage increases by 25% for 5 seconds. This isn't like an amazing perk anymore because, first of all, a lot of people move off of the plasma, the fencing weapons, over to block weapons because this class is best with the block chainsword. But if you're really interested in using a fencing weapon and you want a 25% range damage increase on top of it instead of a knockback resist, you can use this perk. 25% is a pretty massive bonus, and I do think this perk is over versatility. After switching weapons, your secondary weapon deals 25% more damage. The effect lasts until reloading or switching back to your primary weapon. This class doesn't really use its secondary remotely as much as other classes, and this perk already isn't super valuable, especially compared to these two. So I would just take either Heightened Vigor or Relentless Pursuit based on your personal playstyle. Now, the next thing I would talk about would be Final Shot, because this perk I have slept on before, but I do think it is pretty good. After a finisher, the equipped ranged weapon reloads automatically. This is primarily amazing on the bolt carbine, because the bolt carbine ammo variant already has a tremendous amount of ammo, especially if we take it with things like Skilled Supplier for an extra increase of 15%, and on top of the fact that the extra spread reduction here, or I should say the increased spread on the 2 accuracy accuracy here. It doesn't really matter for us at all when we have hone precision. Equip weapons maximum spread decreases by 50% when firing without aiming. This pretty much turns your hip fire into a laser beam, and it's actually more accurate than just shooting your gun manually or like manually aiming. So I pretty much always take this if you're using the tactical, and tactical can pretty much just go down this tree for the bolt carbine while using the actual final shot perk, because you don't need things like gun strike reload, because again, you're just going to be cycling this with executes. The next perk here is Steady Aim. Weapon spread and recoil are reduced by 20%, and range damage against terminus level enemies is increased by 10%. This isn't a super valuable perk. Weapon spread and recoil aren't like totally non-issues in this game, but they don't matter that much, especially when we can take things like accuracy variance with Emperor's Vengeance and have infinite ammo anyways. So Steady Aim, not super good. I wish they would actually buff this perk quite a bit. And terminus damage increased by 10% isn't bad. It's just we're on a class with Aspect Scan and Battle Focus, and we already nuke bosses faster than any other class anyways. Now, Emperor's Vengeance, killing a Majoris level or higher enemy restores your primary weapon's ammo by 1 magazine, cannot exceed maximum ammo capacity, cooldown is 30 seconds. This is still one of the strongest perks in the entire game. It just says you have infinite ammo with your primary weapon, and that's really all you needed to say. And especially with things like Skilled Supplier, you will pretty much never run out of ammo, even in a true solo with increased spawns now, if you have Emperor's Vengeance. It is just that good. Now, as far as team perks are concerned, Communion of Fire, recoil is reduced by 25%, and ranged damage against extremis level enemies is increased by 10% for all squad members. This is probably the worst team perk here by far, in my opinion. The recoil reduction just doesn't matter that much, and a ranged damage increase of 10% to only extremis. Like, that's just not that useful in this game, unfortunately. Honestly, if this just said, like, Majoris and Extremis, that would be fine, because this one is already, like, 15% for ranged damage, period, against everything. And I know they didn't want to make it, like, redundant here by having Communion of Fire do the same thing, but, like, they reduced the bonus to, like, 5% and made, like, the recoil reduction, like, up on top of another benefit. It might be worth taking over Aligned Aim, which I think is currently the best perk here, because the only competition would be Transhuman Physiology. All squad members restore 30% more contested health from range damage. This isn't a bad perk. This is actually pretty useful, because a lot of times the thing you actually get your contested HP back from is your ranged weapon, and this just makes that much better. But Aligned Aim, range damage increases by 15% for all squad members is just too good to pass up, in my opinion. And things like the Bolt Carbine and Plasma, they already don't really suffer at all from, like, a lack of contested HP recovery, because for some reason in this game, ranged weapons have, like, disproportionately high contested health recovery for the most part, except for, like, Neo Volkite Pistol. So Transhuman Physiology can be redundant in some cases, but it's still a useful perk. Now, as far as gear perks are concerned, Vital Data, scanning an extremis or terminus level enemy restores Aspect Scans charged by 50%. This is not a terrible perk by any means. It's just not as good as Priority Targeting, because 50% reduction is good. It's just Priority Targeting lets our Aspects last longer and also buffs our Battle Focus perk, which is the best perk in this game, in my opinion. So Priority Targeting, the mark from Aspect Scan lasts 8 seconds longer, base 8, but Aspect Scan ignores Minoris level enemies. The negative of this perk doesn't really matter, because Minoris enemies are already super easy to kill in the first place, and, like, you're never going to be shooting a Minoris horde with your Aspect Scan, and, like, unless it's on accident or it's, like, inside of, like, an entire Majoris group. So it's just not that useful. Now, what's really not useful is Target Lock. Enemies marked by Aspect Scan take 75% more equipment damage. Now, when it comes to equipment damage buffs in this game, a 20% buff is all it takes to get, like, crack grenades up to a one-shot, but the fact you have to have them on Aspect Scan is already terrible, and really a crack grenade buff for, like, an actual breakpoint is pretty awful on its own, and Melt-A-Bombs already one-shot everything anyways, and Shock Grenades already kill the things you'd want them to do, or you'd want them to kill in the first place, or they slow down Majoris or Extremis, and things like Frag Grenades are already pretty mediocre, and you swap them out to begin with. Now, Battle Focus, a perfectly timed parry or block gives the parried enemy a mark from Aspect Scan. This is the best perk in this game. This one also benefits from all other Aspect Scan buffs we have with things like Priority Targeting and Concentrated Fire. This just lets you parry and nuke down whatever is in front of you. It is so exceptionally good that, like, really this class could handle, like, 10 times the amount of current enemies in the game, because he is just that strong. Now, Improved Efficiency. Scanning any 10 enemies or 3 Majoris level or higher enemies with 1 Aspect Scan restores Majora's equipment charge by 1. This is actually pretty good. This would be even better if you like paired it with Vital Data. It's just unfortunate that his equipment recharge is tied to the same tree as Battle Focus, and if you're like trying to use a meta build and you're trying to use like the strongest thing possible, and you're trying to just like mess around, there is no point you would ever take improved efficiency over Battle Focus. And the same goes for Precise Calibration. Enemies marked by Auspex Scan take an additional 75% damage, but Auspex Scan's radius is reduced by 25%. Damage bonuses to Auspex are good, but Battle Focus is just better, especially when like Battle Focus benefits the most from damage bonuses from Auspex. And now that takes us to things like close targeting. When Auspex Scan is in cooldown, melee damage increases by 25%. This is a pretty good perk, and I would use this if I wasn't using Battle Focus, and like I actually do kind of like the melee damage increase here. 25% is pretty hefty, especially on things like a blockchain sword, and especially this one. Yeah, the speed version of the block is better, by the way. A lot of people ask me this. It's because the way block works is on your first perfect block, you get a 30% damage increase, and then the next one gives you a 90%, and then those buffs on the actual Adrenaline Rush hit from 2 charges will stay for like a second after, and this lets you get more heavy hits in, which comes out to greater overall damage, and it still chews through Minoris and like Majora's on its own, especially with the breakpoints of Battle Focus that already allow us to one-shot Majora's with like a bash and the combo skip in the first place. Which takes us to things like Expert Timing. Enemies scanned marked by Auspex Scan take an additional 75% damage, but the mark's duration is reduced by 4 seconds, base 8. I used to use this a lot more than I do now because I think Concentrate Fire is more valuable, and this one is Auspex Scan Zone lasts 60% longer, and enemies marked by Auspex Scan take an additional 120% damage, but they lose the mark when they leave the scanned area. When you are using Battle Focus, you hardly really need your actual Auspex Scan to begin with, and Battle Focus is just that strong, and getting an additional 120% damage buff to Battle Focus, which really comes out like with the actual base Auspex Scan damage bonus, it comes out to like 200% damage bonus increase pretty much all the time with Battle Focus on whatever is in front of you. So Concentrated Fire, super valuable. I will say, if you are using the Prestige perk of Second Look, it doesn't really benefit at all from Concentrated Fire, which is kind of unfortunate. Or maybe it's kind of beneficial because you can then take things like Skilled Supplier, Resilience, and Fortitude and Acuity all together and really have no downside to using those because these two aren't very valuable. Now, as far as these signature perks go, Signal Jammer. Enemies marked by Auspex Scan cannot call for reinforcements and automatically explode upon attempting to do so. They did buff this thing with like the whole explode portion, but like it's still the worst signature perk by far. You pretty much never use this. It's a really bad perk, and as far as I'm concerned, I think they should just rework this perk entirely because there's no real way to make like a use of Auspex Scan to stop reinforcement good in this game. Now, what is good is Radiating Impact. A melee finisher additionally deals significant area of effect damage in a 10-meter radius. Cooldown is 90 seconds. This perk is deceptively good. I think this is the best signature perk, and this thing regularly overperforms, and it scales much higher than Marked for Death, which is a headshot will instantly kill a Majora's or Extremis level enemy marked by Auspex Scan. Cooldown is 120 seconds. This isn't a bad perk, it's just not as valuable in the higher difficulties as Radiating Impact is, and this would primarily be used against things like a Zoanthrope, but like on this class, you already delete Zoanthrope so easily on its own, and Radiating Impact will pretty much body entire hordes at times. Like, you will see this thing demolish whole Majora's packs, whole Extremis packs if they're all around you, and it's kind of just like a crazy perk, to be honest. I'm surprised they haven't nerfed it yet, and its cooldown being 90 seconds is pretty short, to be honest. I'm pretty sure they buffed this at one point, and Marked for Death is still definitely an option. It's just, I don't think it's as valuable as Radiating Impact, and Radiating Impact really is just kind of cracked, to be honest. Now, as far as the Prestige perks go, Acuity, each consecutive headshot increases headshot by 3% up to 15%. The bonus lasts 5 seconds without a headshot. This is the best perk here by far, though this does not benefit the Plasma Gun in any way because the Plasma Gun does not get any headshot modifiers, so just keep that in mind. Now, Ammo Reserve increases by 15% with Skilled Supplier. More ammo is good. This is also pretty beneficial if you're using things like Final Shot. Second Look, if no enemy has been scanned by the time the Auspex Scan Zone disappears, Auspex Scan's charge is restored. This is also pretty decent. It's just not useful at all if you're using Concentrated Fire because, like, you know, this just means you always have your Auspex up if you're not using that perk. So I used to not like this perk. I think it's not too bad. Not incredible, but, you know, it does its thing. Now, spare power, collecting an ammo box restores ability charge by 25%. These like little pickup perks are always pretty trash, and again, battle focus is more important than our actual aspects anyways, and things like resilience with 40% more health off Medicaid stims. This just means we live, and like this class doesn't really have a ton of HP regen or like survivability perks in the first place, so having like a little stim perk is super useful for him. Same thing with fortitude, health increases by 15%. This is pretty much like a mandatory pick on every class that has it because health in this game is super valuable. Now, exigency charge, when your health is less than 25%, ability charge generates 15% faster, is just trash. Same thing with these. These two are just trash. It's unfortunate, but it's just how it is. Now it is time to talk about his weapons, and primarily the Plasma Incinerator, because I do think Plasma is the best build on this guy currently, and that's really what I want to cover here. So of the 4 variants of venting speed, good old ammo capacity, firepower, and our glorious rate of fire, I believe rate of fire is the best variant, mainly because of the way contested HP works in this game, just how the Plasma functions, and that your charge shots are the most important thing on this weapon. And there used to be 2 nodes of perpetual velocity for shots charged 15% faster. Now there was only 1, so rate of fire is that much more valuable on this thing. And really, this lets you get back your contested HP a lot faster, even if you have to dodge, especially against chaos where you're constantly dodging range fire and things like that. So I just think this is really, really valuable. And the way I would set it up would be pretty much go down the blast radius tree, because common shot generating 10% less heat. Common shots on this thing kind of suck. They're really only useful against things like Hormigons that have like an innate extra damage on them from plasma shots, but even then it's just not all that useful. This thing is pretty ammo efficient now when we go down this tree for like rampage and efficient charge shots from this plasma weapon use 2 less energy. There's another note of that now over here for another efficient charge. So if you take both of these, that's 4 less. If you take the plasma perk, which you definitely will be, that is 5 less. So like this thing comes out to like, I believe it's using 5 shots or like 5 energy per charge shot, which is really, really good on this gun. And overall, the plasma is just in a really good spot right now. The only things I would really change around would be like whether or not you want to use something like adamant adamant velocity, or something like adamant restoration, which is when your health drops below 30%, your ammo reserve is restored by 25% of the maximum capacity. This isn't super useful on us because usually when you're using plasma, you're almost always going to be taking Emperor's Vengeance, because this weapon doesn't benefit at all from recoil and spread reduction, and it also doesn't benefit at all from being automatically reloaded. So you're pretty much never running out of ammo with the Plasma Incinerator because of these 2 nodes anyways, and he's already just a super ammo efficient class to begin with. And fast venting, weapons cool 15% faster, perpetual velocity, perfect radius. After your perfect time dodge, the damage radius of charge shot increases by 10% for 10 seconds. This is not as valuable as retaliation, which is after a perfectly timed dodge, you deal 25% more damage for 10 seconds, but this is definitely far more valuable than adamant restoration by giving us extra charge shot when we are below 30% HP, because charge shot increases are pretty hard to come by in this. And these 2 nodes here, the weapon cools 15% faster, charge shots generate 10% more heat. I mean, this doesn't really affect us on rate of fire because you still get 3 shots off regardless of whether or not you have this on, but this can affect things like the venting version, wherever that is, right here. This will affect the venting version a little bit, if I remember correctly. It's like it gets you 1 less shot, but overall, the venting version is kind of okay. It does let you get like more shots off to begin with, but it's just the charge rate's too slow, in my opinion. Now, as far as common efficiency goes, common shots generate 20% less heat, shots charge 20% slower. This is a terrible perk because charge shots are just the best thing on this perk tree, on this weapon to begin with, so it just doesn't do a whole lot for us. And now I want to move into the actual plasma pistol for a second, because the plasma pistol, I would pretty much just take either the good old rate of fire here too, because we don't really need the extra ammo capacity like say the Bulwark or Assault would, because we're a tactical, we're shooting our primary weapon far more than our secondary, and this does benefit from all the benefits of the plasma perks as well. Now if you do take the venting version, I do want to say that charge cooling, charge shots generate 10% less heat. This is totally trash and worthless on all the other versions of this weapon, but this will also let you shoot like 9 shots with the venting plasma version. It gets you like a whole extra charge shot, but I don't really know why you would ever need to shoot 9 charge shots with a plasma pistol, because that's pretty much all your ammo on this gun. But I mean, hey, if you want to shoot 9 charge shots, this is how you do it. You just take these perks and you go blasting. But as far as like the actual setups would go, for most of them, if you're not taking the venting version, I would just do something like this, because I just think energy, even on the secondary for tactical, and especially if you're on like Bulwark or Assault, I would just take something like this. And I think this is the best setup for Plasma Pistol currently, even though I don't think this 10% damage increase actually gives us any actual like breakpoints. But either way, if you take these energy reserves, you're going to be going down into a 10% eventually. So that's pretty much all I have to say on the actual perk trees and best weapon setup. As far as the chain swords go, or like combat knife's not bad. Chain sword's just better, and the Artificer block chain sword is the best version on here. And even if I was taking a fencing version, I would always set it up this way, because full throttle is kind of mandatory if you're trying to play a meta build on this, because the combo skip is very important. I do have a video on that as well. And as far as other options go, that's pretty much it. I don't think the block version of the relic one's all that great. It's pretty slow. Really speed with chain swords is all you want. And as far as like combat knife goes, again, block combat knife, definitely the best combat knife. Fastest speed. Balance one, you know, is not that bad. I think the balance one's actually over the fencing one in this case, but still. Block knives, block weapons in this game are just better than fencing currently. And that's really all I have to say on the tactical class for his best build. I would set it up like this with the plasma incinerator, the plasma pistol, and then your block chain sword. Or alternatively, your fencing chain sword if you really want to use that, because this guy can kind of get away with just spamming range even all by himself. And as far as the perk trees go, I would take something like this. I think this is the best current perk setup for him. You should probably swap out QED for something like, I don't know, maybe not second look, but something like skill supplier, resilience, fortitude, and then you can pick one of these two perks if you really have to. But I usually just leave a QED on because I don't feel like spending my extra points, and also these two perks suck. Alright, it's time to talk about the Assault class in patch 7.2 Space Marine 2. His best perks, what I think is currently his best build. The Assault class is really in a good spot right now. He has received a lot of buffs over the course of the game's life cycle, and really he is stronger than ever, especially with the recent buff to the Power Sword, which I think might actually be his best weapon currently, and we'll get into that shortly. But the first thing I really want to talk about would be his perks, and just go through these one by one, because there are a lot of misconceptions of the Assault's perks and how some of them function, and this guy does have quite a few moving parts. I get it, because he's got a jump pack. But the point is, this guy's pretty fun to play, and he does have some pretty good options, mainly in his core tree, not so much his gear tree. But the first thing I really want to talk about would be Winged Fury. Damage from melee attacks executed while sprinting or dashing increases by 40%. This perk is by far the worst perk in like this entire line, and really, dash attacks, their damage is already pretty trash. 40% sounds like a chunky number. It's just unfortunate that it's attached to like the worst attacks he has, and really the best use of a dash attack and like a sprinting attack in this game would be to like have the function of the stagger, because if you're unaware, the sprinting and dashing attacks in this game, they will stagger enemies, they will stagger range guys, they will stagger Majoris. That's like the best use of it. It doesn't stagger all the extremis in this game. But overall, dash attacks aren't used for damage remotely as much. This perk is not very valuable. What is very valuable, though, is Overcharge. Damage from charged melee attacks increases by 25%. So this counts for any attack that's like Aftershock on the Thunderhammer, holding down your right click or whatever it is on console for you. Things like Full Throttle, things like the Power Rake on the Power Sword, not the Power Whirl. So like anything you're holding down your trigger or right click on your mouse to attack with, this will boost the damage of that. So this is very useful. This will also help things like the Power Fist hit breakpoints with its charge attack to one-shot Majoris and to execute. Very, very good perk. And what is also a very, very good perk is Armor Reinforcement. Non-finisher gun strikes restore one armor segment. This is one of the most valuable perks in this game, and especially if you're using something like a fencing weapon, because the way armor works in Space Marine 2 is that as long as you have any amount of armor, an incoming melee attack will do 0 health damage to you. This is not true for range attacks, like a Zoanthrope Beam will still cook you, but anything that's a melee attack, Lictor hits, like a singular Ravener hit, it will just absorb that. So this is really useful if you're getting ganged on by like triple Lictors and you just blast one in the face, you get an armor back, and the next hit, instead of taking down like, 70% of your HP, 50% of your HP, it only takes off like a little armor chunk, and you can get some damage on them as well. So these are both really viable. I would say I do take Armor Reinforcement when I'm building like a full Wings of Flame build, but you can also take Overcharge, because sometimes the damage is all you want. And speaking of damage, Auxiliary Arsenal. Secondary weapons damage increases by 20%. This is a very, very valuable perk, especially when we stack it with practice aim. Range damage increases by 15%. Prior to the patch they did on the PTS server, this was a 20% buff, and this was 15%, so they swapped that to make this even more valuable, which I think is a good change. And really, secondary weapon damage on this guy with the heavy bolt pistol is already pretty high, and having a 35% increase makes killing things like zoanthropes, which are really your biggest enemy, and also things like Rubric Marines, that much easier. So I would pretty much always take this, and the only thing I would take over this, if I'm not like, memeing around, would be consecutive execution, which is killing 7 enemies in rapid succession, restores equipment charge by 1. Cooldown is 90 seconds. This is also a hyper valuable perk because all equipment regen in this game is hyper valuable. A Melt-A-Bomb can one-shot an entire Extremis pack, and getting a 90-second cooldown on that's even easier than ever now. It only takes 7 kills instead of 10, which was like the previous patch number for rapid succession kills. So this is super valuable. I used to take this all the time. I just think this having a 20% instead of 15% is so valuable, and you can just stack range damage on a class that usually doesn't have a ton of range damage, but this is super noticeable, super good. This is my preferred. Now the next perk here would be Retribution. After you are grabbed or knocked back, you deal 25% more melee damage for 20 seconds. This is a pretty good perk. I don't think it is remotely as valuable as Auxiliary Arsenal or Consecutive Execution, but 25% more melee damage for 20 seconds, that is a pretty large chunk of damage for a pretty long uptime. 20 seconds is a long time in this game, and getting grabbed or knocked back, that just happens pretty often in this game, especially with like the Assault where you can't animation cancel like the Bulwark can. So Retribution, it procs quite often. It's up for a long time. You get more damage. You can definitely use this if you just want to go like full melee damage. And really, in this game, the way your ground pound works is as long as you have like a melee damage bonus like knowledge of the enemy, you will have an increased ground pound damage. Same thing for stuff like your block weapon charges. So if you get like the adrenaline rush stacks, like the 2 stacks for 90% damage, that will count for your jump pack ground pound. So stuff like this can really help you hit breakpoints, and it's pretty damn good. And also sometimes you'll just outright one-shot lictors when you take all melee damage bonuses, or one-shot other things like biovores as well. So it definitely has its use there. It's just Retribution is not overall as useful as range damage because we really lack range damage for the most part on this class, and blowing up zoanthropes is like our #1 killer anyways, especially with things like let's say Chaos's Terminators. We want damage on those for sure. Now the next thing I want to talk about here would be the last part of the core tree, which would have Perseverance. While performing charge attacks, you take 25% less health damage, do not lose control upon taking heavy hits, and cannot be knocked back. This perk is probably the least valuable perk in this portion of the tree, mainly because our best charge attacks already have their own hyper armor, like things like the Aftershock on the Thunderhammer. There are 2 redundant perks at this, stuff like Brace Preparation gives you no knockback on Aftershock. You already have no knockback on Aftershock, like as a built-in hyper armor, so this is kind of redundant. 25% less health damage isn't bad. That's quite a hefty chunk. It's just that this is in a pretty poor tree for it, mainly because the knowledge of the enemy and active attrition are both better perks. Now, knowledge of the enemy, melee damage increases by 15% against Majoris or Extremis level enemies. This will help you hit breakpoints with both stuff like the Power Fist and even the Thunderhammer at times. So Thunderhammer doesn't scale super well with Aftershock because of the way the damage is calculated on the actual charge attack on this, but Power Fist, it hits some breakpoints even with the Balanced Fist to one-shot Majoris into execute alongside overcharge. So knowledge of the enemy is very useful for that. Also boosts your jump pack charge, or excuse me, your jump pack ground pound for even more damage. That is also super useful. Now, the next perk here would be active attrition. Enemies hit by melee attacks take 10% more damage for 3 seconds. So this is a 10% damage buff to everything. Some people think this perk stacks. That is not true. This perk only applies once per enemy for 3 seconds, and this will also count for things like your gun strike damage, your ground pound, literally anything you do. Active attrition is pretty strong. I value knowledge of the enemy a little higher because it helps our ground pound off rip. This is what I use pretty much all the time, but if you want to take active attrition and you want to go for like the full-on gun strike Wings of Flame build, you can do something like that. Like, that is definitely an option. Now, as far as team perks are concerned, squad cohesion, all squad members' abilities recharge 10% faster. This isn't terrible, it's just not as valuable to me as, say, our proven efficiency or strategic strikes. 10% ability recharge is kind of hard to come by for everybody, but there are better versions of this perk, stuff like the Inner Fire on Vanguard if you really want cooldown reduction, and these days, Bulwark can pretty much spam his shield with Masterful Defense, because now they gave this class his own ability recharge, which is pretty insane. Now, the next thing I want to talk about really with these kind of team perks is that Strategic Strikes is kind of slept on. All squad members deal 20% more melee damage against Extremis and Terminus level enemies. I like this a lot. This is probably the best for the Thunder Hammer because unfortunately, the Thunder Hammer is currently locked to like the block for the most part, or maybe like the relic balance if you really want to hit proper breakpoints on it. And really, the Thunder Hammer benefits from pure melee damage more than most of the weapons do, mainly because you aren't going to be gun striking as much with it. And also, Zealous Blow is just going to let you like slam down your ground pound, and the more damage you have in your ground pound, the better. So I like Strategic Strikes. I also like this for things with the Power Sword, and sometimes I just want to go like full melee, even if I'm not using like a straight up Wings of Flame build. But Proven Efficiency. All squad members deal 30% more gun strike damage. This is a classic. This used to be 50% when the game launched. This was like a pretty goated perk, still is, and this is still amazing with stuff like the Wings of Flame build when you stack it with like Aerial Grace for 30% more damage, Commitment, you just start zooming around, shooting things in the face. It is quite good. I honestly think that Wings of Flame might be the best build on Assault currently, especially with the Power Sword and Power Fist, and Proven Efficiency just makes our gun strikes that much better, and this also has excellent synergy with Armor Reinforcement. So that's my opinion on Proven Efficiency and his team perks. He just has like a couple good options here. I've tried taking Squad Cohesion in solo against Chaos because sometimes they don't get a ton of gun strikes off. It's just, I feel like this perk in particular should be reworked a little bit. Maybe give like a better bonus, like 20% or something. That might be a little too OP for a team perk, but you know, a new effect beyond just like a boring ability recharge rate might be more interesting. Now, as far as gear perks go, the gear perks for Assault are kind of boring because he only really has like 2 super viable setups at the moment. Maybe like 3 if you count Diligence over stuff like Pride and Duty and Aerial Grace. But overall, gear perks are pretty boring, and the first one we have here is Smiting Angel. Ground pounds damage increases by 10%. I've taken this with Zealous Blow for a ground pound kill, restoring jump packs charged by 10% for things like the Power Fist in the past, but these days I just value Precision Strike so much more than all these other perks, especially Hammer of Wrath, which we will get into in a second. But Precision Strike, ground pound deals 100% more damage, but its radius is reduced by 50%. This is super valuable. The damage radius reduction hardly matters at all for things like the Thunder Hammer, and if you're not using the Thunder Hammer, you're probably not using Zealous Blow to begin with, and Precision Strike just lets us slam into an enemy and one-shot a lot of the Majoris in this game, and that is really what we need, because damage is what this class is all about, because you're pretty much sacrificing your survivability on something like the Bulwark for aerial movement, the ability to dash, to gun strike harder, and to deal more melee damage than the Bulwark, though Bulwark these days kind of cracked, so it might not exactly be a one-to-one trade-off. But the point is, Precision Strike really helps us do more damage. I take this all the time. I think this is an S tier perk on this class, and the more I've used it, the more I've enjoyed it. Now, Hammer of Wrath. After a ground pound, you take 15% less range damage, do not lose control upon taking heavy hits, and cannot be knocked back for 10 seconds. Unfortunately, once again, most of the weapons that would benefit from this, and like not taking a knockback, and like having no knockback, it's already built into them with their hyper armor, and 15% less range damage just is not super valuable for like 10 seconds. And really, ever since Assault got his prestige perks with Adrenaline Boost after a perfectly timed parry, block, or dodge, you do not lose control upon taking heavy hits, and you cannot be knocked back for 10 seconds. He really hasn't needed any other form of knockback resist outside of this, because this is the best knockback resist perk in the game, besides like Heightened Vigor on the Tactical, mainly because Tactical is OP, and he gets bonus damage for some reason on his version of this, but still, this really helps out Assault. This is a pretty clutch perk, a pretty goated S tier perk, and it makes perks like Hammer of Wrath quite redundant. Now, Wings of Flame, a jump pack dash damages enemies along its trajectory, and always works as a perfect dodge when dodging an attack. Now, the damage this does counts as melee damage as far as I know, so that should stack with perks like Knowledge of the Enemy, to my knowledge. To my knowledge of the enemy, get it? But the point is that Wings of Flame, pretty good perk. I've slept on this for a long time, this and Aerial Grace. Unfortunately, if you want to get the full benefit of Wings of Flame, you have to build all the way into a jump pack dash build with Commitment for the restoration of your jump pack on a perfect dodge, and Aerial Grace for the 30% more damage for 10 seconds on a perfectly timed jump pack dash. So really, that's really all you're going to be using this with to begin with. So Wings of Flame, pretty OP when you take it all in conjunction with this stuff. Now, maneuverability. Jump pack recharges 20% faster. I mean, this is just a flat recharge increase. This is definitely noticeable, especially if you stack it with like everything else like this. And this guy already got a base jump pack recharge rate of 10%. Like a 10% bonus increase to that in like a recent PTS patch that is now on the live game as well. So overall, his jump pack dash comes back pretty quickly. I just don't think this is as valuable as Zealous Blow, which is a ground pound kill, restores jump packs charged by 10%. This is a super goated perk when you take it with a Thunderhammer, because you can just cycle indefinitely into Hormigaunt swarms and pretty much kill everything in a loop. You can honestly get back like double, like your full 2 charge jump pack in 1 ground pound when you use Zealous Blow on a Hormigaunt horde. It is that good, even with Precision Strike. Though I would pretty much only take this on stuff like a Power Fist with Smiting Angel or a Thunderhammer, because your Thunderhammer has the largest radius with your ground pound of any weapon you have, and all the other ones are kind of mid with Zealous Blow, so I really just build them into Wings of Flame these days, or Maneuverability. Now, Pride and Duty, after a finisher, ground pound deals 25% more damage for 10 seconds. 10 seconds is a long uptime, and ground pound damage can help you hit more breakpoints, especially on things like Stronger Majoris, Enraged Majoris especially, and Extremis enemies. I used to use Diligence over this, which is a fully prepared ground pound, deals 20% more damage, but preparation time increases by 25%. But executes in this game, or like finishers in this game, they occur all the time, and this does function for like Minoris as well. So overall, Pride and Duty, super valuable, super chunky increase in damage on your ground pound. It's pretty much 100% uptime in a horde. Now, the next perk here, it's pretty S tier, would be Aerial Grace. After a perfectly timed dodge using a jump pack dash, you deal 30% more damage for 10 seconds. So it's just a flat damage increase. This should affect your gun strike damage, make you even stronger in the Wings of Flame build, and really you're going to be taking this anyways. You have Wings of Flame to begin with. Now, signature perks. Ample Ammunition. Any use of jump pack reloads the equipped ranged weapon and increases damage by 50% for 10 seconds. This is a pretty enormous ranged weapon increased damage, and I'm kind of shocked they gave a 50% buff to your secondary, but I guess that's kind of what you have to do to make ample ammunition worth using over something like Commitment in a Wings of Flame build, because range damage in this game is pretty strong and it's kind of hard to come by for the most part. So ample ammunition, pretty good perk. I'd say it's like A tier. And then we have Ascension. Jump Pack Leap deals the damage to all enemies in the takeoff area. This is pretty trash. This actually gets you killed a lot because this will blow up barrels around you. And sometimes it'll blow up barrels or like behind walls that you cannot possibly see. So I don't think this is very good at all, to be honest. I used to take this like when the game first came out all the time. But this perk has also been bugged before to like literally blow you up and like detonate your crack grenades in your pocket. So I have anxiety about using Ascension now. Not very good. The damage is also pretty trash in general. I'd say this is pretty like D to F tier. Now, Commitment. A perfectly timed dodge using a jump pack dash restores jump pack's ability charge. This just makes your jump pack dash viable and worth using. I do think this should just be like a passive perk, like a perfect dodge on the jump pack dash, so it should simply give you back your full charge no matter what. You shouldn't have to build into it with a signature perk, and this is pretty lame to me. I'm not a big fan that Commitment is like a forced signature perk, but that's just the way the game is at the moment. I would like a rework of like literally every single one of these signature perks, because they've tried to fix them since the game came out and they're still boring. And like the question is, are you building Wings of Flame? The answer is yes. Okay, then you are taking this perk no matter what. There is no choice here. It's just like, these are the perks you build into, and I feel like if you're going to have a setup like that, you should probably have the class in general have more options and just build them into the class as a passive, so players have more options to actually build into on the actual perks, because perks are supposed to be a choice, not a no-brainer, in my opinion. And now it is time to talk about the prestige perks for the Assault class. And now 5 out of these are really good to mediocre, and the other 2 are diabolical trash. Boosted Recharge, collecting an armor boost restores ability charge by 100%. This is just not a very high value perk in this game. And really, armor boosts aren't uncommon, but there's no guarantee that you're going to be the one to find one, and it could be your teammates. And like, how much value is this actually producing for us per game? Pretty much none, because ability charge comes back pretty quickly on this class anyways, and usually like both the meta builds for this game's class with Zealous Blow and Commitment, they automatically refund the entirety of your jump pack. So this really only gives you back like a ground pound, maybe. And there's also no guarantee that when you do find the armor boost, it's going to be in a time where you need to have your ability charge back. Because oftentimes when I find an armor boost in this game, it's during downtime. So this perk is very bad. in my opinion. Now, Adrenaline Boost. After a perfectly timed parry, block, or dodge, you do not lose control upon taking heavy hits, and you cannot be knocked back for 10 seconds. I mentioned this perk earlier. This is an S tier perk. This produces so much value for us, and really, I think you should take this all the time. It's pretty much mandatory. So the next perk here is Duelist. Perfect parry and perfect block windows increased by 25%. I think this is only really valuable for perfect block these days. I have flip-flopped on this quite a bit, but this does not affect the startup frames of your parries with a balanced weapon. If you are unaware, balanced parry weapons in this game have a 10-frame startup where you simply cannot get an actual parry off. It will always be a block, so you have to pre-parry the enemy. This does not affect that at all, and really the situations where the perfect parry increase would bail you out of frame traps really only exist in increased spawn mods in this game, and you're never going to find that in the vanilla game almost ever. So I don't rate this super high outside of perfect block anymore, and my opinion on this has changed, but overall still a good perk for perfect block and still really good in things like increased spawn mods. Now, next perk is Fortitude. Health increases by 15%. This is simply a god tier perk. This is a really simple effect. You just get 15% more HP, but HP in this game is super valuable because the lower your HP gets, the more damage reduction the game gives you at a base level, which means the higher your total HP is, the better your effective HP is going to be when you are low HP, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does, but HP, super valuable. Always take Fortitude. This is like the best perk in this whole tree, to be honest, besides like maybe Adrenaline Boost. God tier perk. Now, Scramble Targeting. If you are surrounded by 5 or more enemies, you take 20% less range damage from attacks. This is really good. I would say, you know, it's not super useful sometimes because you don't always take a ton of range damage while you're fighting melee guys, but Scramble Targeting is some of the only damage reduction we get on Assault. I think this is still pretty useful. Maybe take this over Duelist if you're playing the vanilla game. Scramble Targeting is quite a good perk. Now, Practice Aim. Range damage increases by 15%. You know, again, a boring perk effect, but a really good perk effect. Range damage is pretty self-explanatory. More range damage is always good. I pretty much always take this, and we combine this with the Auxiliary Arsenal, as we mentioned previously. You get a 35%, potentially up to like 85%, potentially up even more with Aerial Grace for another 30%. Really good perk, really good synergy with the heavy bolt pistol. I always take this. Now, Commendation. Reviving a squad member fully restores jump packs charged in all armor segments. Trash tier perk. Revive perks in this game are usually done pretty poorly outside of like Bonds of Brotherhood. And getting all of your jump pack and armor segments up when you're trying to save somebody, usually when you get somebody up, it's not like a do or die in this game. Especially when you're Assault class, like you're probably better off just fighting off the enemies around them first. Commendation, not super good, especially not over these other 5. Now I want to talk about what I think is one of the best builds for the Assault class, which is the Wings of Flame Fencing Power Sword build. I know fencing weapons are still very popular in this game, and I do rank the Power Fist ever so slightly higher than the Fencing Power Sword is at the moment, but Fencing Power Sword got buffed, really Power Sword in general got buffed. I think this is currently the best fencing weapon in the game, and really this guy benefits a ton from the buffs that happen with the Power Rake, and Wings of Flame is just a strong Gunstrike build in general, and you really get all the benefits of the Assault class in one package. So first thing I would take here is Armor Reinforcement for armor on gun strikes, then our Auxiliary Arsenal for our secondary weapons damage increased by 20%. Alternatively, you could take something like Consecutive Execution or even Retribution like we mentioned previously, and then I would also take Knowledge of the Enemy or Active Attrition here, but this is just the setup I have decided to use today. And also here, we're going to be taking Proven Efficiency. I think this is the best setup here, mainly because, we're doing gun strikes all the time with Wings of Flame, so this is always good for us here. Now, next would be Precision Strike. Ground Pound deals 100% more damage, but its radius is reduced by 50%. High value, as mentioned previously. Wings of Flame for the better perfect dodge and better melee damage on our jetpack trajectory. Aerial Grace for more damage on our perfect dodge. You get the picture here, and then we get Commitment for that perfect dodge recharge, which is unfortunately mandatory for any Wings of Flame build, in my opinion, if you want to be like fully optimal. Now, as far as the Fencing Power Sword goes, I would say this is the best perk setup for him at the moment. Now, the Minora's Slayer perk, I flip-flopped on this quite a bit, mainly because I used to think that this was kind of a high value, but unfortunately this does not hit any breakpoints as far as I know anymore. Though you should take into account that you are not the only source of damage in this game, so sometimes this can kill Minoras who would otherwise be unable to, but overall, I think it is more beneficial to have the power style contested health restored by 100%. It's not super good. This isn't like the Chainsword's Swift Recovery for contested health recovery, but it's still decent. I just think the Power Sword overall benefits a lot more from having armor up than actually trying to go for your contested health, but this is the best perk setup in my opinion. As far as the heavy bolt pistol goes, this is the best perk setup for this. Pretty much just go straight damage into headshot damage, because really all you want your heavy bolt pistol to do is blast heads. And you can really take whichever version you want. I think the ammo version is more beneficial to us than the firepower and the accuracy variant, though the bloom decrease on the heavy bolt pistol, the accuracy variant, is pretty good. But most of the Majoris in this game, especially Tyranids, which we are usually fighting on the assault class anyways, they have big fat heads, and it's pretty easy to hit them if you have like a bigger bloom, and 6 accuracy ain't bad. But that's really my opinion on the assault class. You could take a power fist build here too. Power fist, I think, is a little bit more meta. I'm just taking into account that most players like fencing, and I think this is the best fencing weapon in the game, like I said previously. And power sword overall is also just a ton of fun. I think it's currently more fun than the power fist, to be honest. And really, if you want to like double down your damage with both the power fist or the power sword for a Wings of Flame build, I would just take overcharge, because this does affect your power rake for the power sword and also your charge attacks for your power fist and hit breakpoints. Alright, it's time to talk about the heavy class in patch 7.2 of Space Marine 2, and what I think is currently his best build, the Multi-Melta. The heavy is pretty much a damage-dealing God of Destruction that is a walking turret, and you pretty much just never stop shooting your gun. And the Multi-Melta in particular has benefited from perk ammo buffs and prestige buffs more than most of the weapons. Plasma as well. Plasma is very powerful. I only think the Multi-Melta slightly outclasses it, mainly because it has stagger on top of damage. And really, with the Multi-Melta, you never run out of ammo if you're using Elite Restoration. Killing a Majora's level or higher enemy restores 10% of your maximum ammo reserve, and this in conjunction with your auxiliary reload prestige perk, melee kills of extremis level or higher enemies restore your primary weapon's ammo by 1 magazine, and multi-kill for killing 5 or more enemies with 1 shot from a multi-melta restores ammo by 1. This all goes together to give you infinite ammo, and you pretty much never stop shooting, even the rate of fire variant, which I think is the best version, because you really don't need range as much on this, and you really don't need ammo at all anymore. And as far as like the actual perks go on this gun, I just go all the way down the top tree, because it's just rate of fire and damage, and that's really all you need. And if you really want to take like swap out damage for something like trick shot, killing 5 enemies with 1 shot, restores 1 armor segment, cooldowns 30 seconds. Armor is really valuable in this game, especially against melee enemies, mainly because the way armor functions in Space Marine 2, as long as you have any amount of armor, the next hit from like a melee enemy will do 0 damage to you. So like a Lictor, a Ravener, doesn't matter, as long as it's like a singular hit, it will do 0 damage to you as long as you have armor. And that same thing goes for like Majoras. The only thing it won't help you with things like restoration for ammo, for armor restoration, is that like a Zoanthrope beam will still go through your armor into your HP, but as long as it's melee, you will be okay. And that brings me to restoration, which is, you know, killing 7 enemies in rapid succession, restores 1 armor segment, cooldown is 15 seconds. This is a good perk because, like I said before, armor is good, and I just think for like a multi-melta, if you want to really double up on the ammo economy, multi-kill is better, and like you don't miss the armor too much. Sometimes it is beneficial. 15 seconds is a pretty long cooldown for armor restoration, but, you know, in conjunction with all the other armor restoration perks, this comes out to like a pretty standard drip feed of armor, and that is good for us. Not as good as like armor reinforcement, but still strong. Now, what is not strong is auxiliary ammunition. When your primary weapon is out of ammo, killing 7 enemies in rapid succession restores ammo reserve by 20%. Cooldown is 30 seconds. First of all, 20% is like not a huge amount in this game compared to like some of the other things you get for free in your weapon perk tree. Like, say the plasma gun has adamant restoration. When your health drops below 30%, your ammo reserve is restored by 25% of the maximum capacity with a 30-second cooldown. And this happens a lot more often than you actually running to 0 with your weapon. So like going to flat out 0 in this game does not happen that often. And if you're using like any ammo restoration perk, like the multi-kill or like an auxiliary reload or something like the Elite Restoration, this will just never proc ever. So this is a pretty trash tier perk. I feel like they should make it so you get like 20% ammunition for it to give you like 10% back or something, because like ammo restoration is really good. This is just like the worst version of the ammo restoration perks in my opinion. Now, as far as like thermal boost is concerned, when a ranged weapon is 50% overheated, range damage increases by 15%. The heavy doesn't really lack damage. Even if you take like 0 perks, he doesn't really lack damage at all. This is just more damage. It isn't a bad perk, perk. This works for things like your heavy bolter and your plasma incinerator. I know some people like to take this. I just think a perk like fortitude is far more valuable. Health increases by 30%. This is a pretty S tier perk because the way health functions in Space Marine 2 is that the lower your total HP gets, like you get to some breakpoints where your damage resist goes up and up and up. So like your effective HP goes up the lower your total HP is, and if like your maximum potential HP is increased by 30%, that means your 25% HP is worth that much more. Your effective HP goes up through the roof, and you can pretty much just sit there and live off contested HP forever. So fortitude is pretty S tier. Strategic stand, while in heavy stance and dealing damage, restores 15% more contested health. You do not lose control by taking heavy hits, and you cannot be moved. You cannot be knocked back, but you will not be able to move. This perk used to be a lot better, but the contested health was apparently bugged, and it would give you like all of your contested HP back off of like 3 heavy bolter rounds. Now it is significantly worse. I don't really take this anymore, and like this whole no knockback effect in heavy stance is already built into perks on the actual weapons a lot of times. Stuff like the heavy plasma incinerator has this built in with heavy immunity, while in heavy stance you do not lose control from heavy hits, and that's really the most beneficial portion of this perk now. It's not terrible. Like 15% more contested health is decent. I just think fortitude is far more valuable than this perk is and this perk. So that's what I would say is like the meta pick here. Now, enhanced force. Melee damage increases by 30%. I mean, if you want to go like for a full-on prestige perk, like exponential force, reverberating impact, melee build, you can do that with this. I would also take things like, where would it be? Perks like, not contingency plan, weapon strike, melee damage increases by 50%. You can get to like, you know, bonus 200% melee damage. And that's kind of goofy, though that doesn't really fit like the heavy's overall play style, which is shooting a gun. So I put this pretty mediocre perk. It functions, but like 30% just isn't a lot to give up for like 15 or like 10% damage active while your Iron Halo is going on, because you're gonna be using your Iron Halo all the time, and all squad members getting 10% more range damage is really good in this game, because like range damage buffs aren't that easy to come by. Like one of the only other ones that can actually be given out to your teammates would be tacticals, aligned aim, and this is like one of the best team perks in the game, or at least one of the best team perks for tactical for sure, probably the best if I'm being honest. But heavy being able to do this in like a similar fashion with the 10% more range damage on top of things like conversion field, which is when Iron Halo is active, all squad members within 20 meters regenerate ability charge 50% faster. You just become like a little buff beacon for your team. That's really good in this game. And versatility, after switching weapons, your secondary weapon does 20% more damage. The effect lasts until reloading or switching back to your primary weapon. This just isn't a very valuable perk, especially for us where we're shooting our primary weapon primarily. And versatility would probably be better on a class like Assault, where your secondary weapon is the most important, but he has Auxiliary Arsenal, which is a flat increase of damage. So a perk like this is significantly better than a perk like Versatility, and like this guy needs it even less than a class like Assault would, because you're only stuck with a secondary on that class. So really, I would just take Overwhelming Power. It's just the best perk in this tree. And as far as team perks go, Encompassing Aegis, all squad members take 25% less damage from ranged attacks. This is actually pretty good, especially now that our ammo economy is fixed. I still take things like additional supplies. Ammo capacity for all squad members' primary weapons increases by 25%. More ammo is really good for us, but taking 25% less damage from all ranged attacks across our whole team, that is a huge chunk of damage. Even though like the damage resistance in this game is multiplicative, that is still a pretty hefty chunk. You definitely notice this damage reduction, and you can definitely take this over additional supplies, because if you're playing in a team, you're probably not going to run out of ammo that much anyways. Though solo, I do still like to actually take the additional supplies. And Bonds of Brotherhood, reviving a squad member restores them to full health. This is not a bad perk, and this can definitely help a lot if like people are newer to absolute difficulty, or you're playing with like some people that are struggling a little bit more. This can help them get out of some tricky situations a little bit more easily once you get revived, because like most people will like waste a bunch of stims or something, or like you don't have invigorating icon on your team. Really, when it comes to like the heavy, his team perks are all pretty decent. Like he's one of the only classes that actually has like a real choice here, so you can really use whatever you want. Personally, I'm taking additional supplies for this build. I think Encompassing Aegis is the second best tier, or like, you know, the equivalent tier to additional supplies, and Bonds of Brotherhood is probably the worst and like pretty useless if like you know how to play properly with like a good team. But if you're playing with like people that are struggling, this is definitely useful. Now, Adamant Will. After Iron Halo deactivates, you take 20% less health damage for 10 seconds. this is just not that useful to us because the good old Iron Halo is going to be up and down all the time, and really, like, when your Iron Halo's up, you're probably going to need it the least. You're probably going to need, excuse me, health damage the least, because you're blocking all the range attacks from with your Iron Halo. And consecutive execution, killing 7 enemies in rapid succession restores equipment charge. Cooldown is 90 seconds. This is the best perk in this tree. Equipment recharge in this game is so valuable. Once you find like a melt-a-bomb or like even crack grenades, and crack grenades are far worse than melt-a-bombs in my opinion, but once you find a melt-a-bomb, this just says every 90 seconds you can one-shot an entire extremis wave on absolute difficulty, and like potentially up to like 3 of them. And that is really, really good. So Emperor's Protection is next. When Iron Halo expends all its energy, 1 armor segment is restored to all squad members. This is actually a trash perk. Both of these are much better than this. Even this one is significantly better than this. Like 1 armor segment, this should be all of them, I'll be honest, guys. If it said all 3, then it might be worth taking over consecutive execution if you're like messing around. But even then, this perk is just not good. Now, next one would be wait, how do I say this? Obdurate Bastion. Iron Halo's durability increases by 20%. I've taken this quite a bit. This is a good perk effect for a 20% increased durability. I have used this for a while, probably like the majority of my heavy runs, to be honest. It functions. It is a good perk, and this will save you a lot if you're just holding your Iron Halo up for a while against a ton of ranged enemies. Though I have since moved to Field Adjustment. Iron Halo recharges 20% faster, but its durability is reduced by 25% because there come a lot of times in this game where you are activating and deactivating your good old Iron Halo quite often. So this can help you with like those little quick moments where you're just activating it and deactivating it, and you want to be able to get it back as soon as possible. And this is also a pretty good synergy perk with Adamant Will to get that 20% health damage decrease for 10 seconds. Now, Power Regulator. Iron Halo loses energy 20% more slowly. I don't think this is a terrible perk. It just means your Iron Halo lasts longer, and this can help against like little chip damage. I just think these two are better. Now, Saving Grace. Reviving a squad member fully restores Iron Halo's charge in all armor segments. This is just a terrible perk. I would just never take this. This one is so much better, a revive perk. If you are going to take a revive perk on the heavy, this is the one to take, not this one. And revive perks in this game overall are pretty terrible, but this one is just exceptionally useless. Like only armor segments, that's pretty poor. Iron Halo charge coming back. Iron Halo doesn't take that long to come back in most cases anyways, and this perk here, Brute Force, when Iron Halo is in cooldown, range damage increases by 15%, is so much more valuable to us than this when our Iron Halo is down. And this pretty much means that like whether or not you are using your Iron Halo or it is down, you will have a buff when you take both of these perks. You'll just have a constant going range damage buff, and that is what we want. We want damage because we are the God of Destruction, as previously mentioned. Now, Wrath of the Imperium. When Iron Halo expends all its energy, enemies in a 10-meter radius take significant damage. I have used this before, and like this is kind of fun for like a goofy little melee build, and this damage is definitely significant. I'm pretty sure it's like the same number as, let's say, like the Vanguard's execution perk for Zone of Impact. So it's really not that bad. It's just the unfortunate part is this isn't like you deactivating the Iron Halo. It actually has to like expend all its energy or get broken, I believe, and that's just kind of shitty. Now, signature perks. Offensive capability. When active, Iron Halo deals damage over time to all enemies within 5 meters. This is a good perk, and I use this one all the time in solo because it is like his only useful perk in solo. And really, this will also get rid of things like, let's say, spore mines. It will also destroy things on contact, like little bramble vines. So it's a pretty amazing perk. I like this one a lot. I even use this in teams quite a bit. But I think overall, the best team perk would be Conversion Field. When Iron Halo is active, all squad members within 20 meters regenerate ability charge 50% faster. 50% increased ability charge is pretty damn good, and a lot of the class perks in this game, especially for things like Bulwark, or the class abilities are very good, like Bulwark Banner, Invigorating Icon. Yeah, I mean, like, no duh. Invigorating Icon kind of OP. So more Invigorating Icons, always good. Now, as far as Heavy's worst signature perk goes, this would be Coolant Reserve. If both of your squad members are incapacitated, defeated, or grabbed, your primary weapon will not overheat and you deal 15% more damage. Like, how often are all of your squad members incapacitated or grabbed? Not often at all. This is a pretty trash perk. Like, this would probably be OP in true solo, but like that's total cheese, so I'm gonna use it there. Now, let's talk about the prestige perks real quick. I have talked about these previously. My opinion on them has changed a little bit, mainly because I have swapped over to taking Reverberating Impact over Duelist a little bit more, because when it comes to like the base game, Perfect block windows and perfect parry windows are good, especially with the perfect block window increase. It's very good for block weapons, but this does not help the startup of your balanced parry window, and it will help you catch yourself out of some frame traps, like an increased parry window. Say like the block parry window is 20 active frames, and the balanced parry window has a 10 frame startup. So like if this helped the startup, it would be significantly better, but the actual parry window increase doesn't really help too much in like the vanilla game. In increased spawns, this will catch like lictors that would otherwise frame trap you at times if there's like 6 guys in front of you, but in like the vanilla game, not too much. So like it's still a good perk, just not as good as I think the stomp area of effect radius increases. This is very good. I think this is far better than the melee damage increase. And auxiliary reload, this is pretty mandatory. Melee kills of extremis level or higher enemies restore your primary weapon's ammo by 1 magazine. This is a god tier perk. This just lets you, this actually scales exceptionally high into higher difficulties. The more extremis there are, the more ammunition you get back. This also counts, I believe, for executions. Not I believe, it 100% counts for executions, not for gun strikes though. And Conviction, when your armor is fully depleted, you take 25% less health damage for 10 seconds. This is an amazing perk because it says when your armor is gone and you start taking health damage, you take less. And like that's when you want to be taking less health damage the most. And 10 seconds is a long active time in this game. Half the time you can get your armor back before this even runs out. Excellent perk, awesome stuff, love this. Now, Indomitable Spirit. While performing a gun strike, you do not lose control upon taking heavy hits, and you cannot be knocked back. This is a really good perk on our class because it pretty much means whenever you gun strike, you will just not be interrupted. And sword warriors are like your greatest doom on this class because their little bone swords are kind of OP. Maybe I'll make a whole video on them one day, but like bone sword warriors on the Tyranids in particular are like the most overtuned enemy in this game, especially when they go enraged. So not getting knocked over by them in your gun strike when like you're parrying them, because we are stuck parrying. There is no block option on this guy. So this is very good, in my opinion. So what I would take here would be like Auxiliary Reload, Conviction, Reverberating Impact, and Indomitable Spirit. And that'd be like my perk choice for this guy. And now as far as his weapon goes, for secondaries, I would say Heavy Bolt Pistol is over Plasma. Plasma has a negative synergy with the Heavy, unfortunately, in that your gun strike has an AoE on the Plasma Pistol, and Plasma will take down your Iron Halo if you gun strike them too close. And that's really, really lame, but that's unfortunately where it's at. And as far as perks go for this, it's pretty standard. Just go for straight damage and headshot damage. Heavy Bolt Pistol has great ammo economy. And Heavy Bolt Pistol also lets you handle the zoanthropes so easily now on this class, especially since it benefits from like the damage buffs you get from your secondary, from your Iron Halo. So pretty much just take Heavy Bolt Pistol, Multi-Melt. This thing will just slap. Hey guys, today we are here on patch 7.2 of Space Marine 2 to talk about the Bulwark class, his best builds for Absolute, and why he's one of the strongest classes in the entire game currently, and really, I would only put him below the Tactical as far as rankings are concerned. Now, the Bulwark has always been a ton of fun to play. He's also one of the most forgiving classes to play for reasons we'll get into shortly, and he's a great class for beginners, really. So the first thing I want to talk about would be his best perk setup. Now, number 1, the Intimidating Aura. A perfectly timed parry deals area of effect damage within a 5-meter radius. Cooldown is 5 seconds. This perk scales with difficulty, so the higher difficulty you're on, the more damage it will do. It simply dumps out an absurd amount of damage in this game. This is one of the best perks in the entire game as far as I am concerned, and fencing weapons really become meta on this guy when you're using this perk, and really I think for like his actual meta setup, this would be the perk to take, and fencing weapons would be the best option with this perk. Now recently they did make a patch where all perfect parry triggers will also trigger on perfect block, though in my experience this is the only exception to that, and I'm pretty sure that's intentional because if perfect block's damage worked with Intimidating Aura on top of it, this guy would actually be broken. Now, the next perk tree I would talk about here, or in the core perk tree, would be Scramble Targeting. If you are surrounded by 5 or more enemies, you take 25% less damage from ranged attacks. Ranged attacks are pretty commonplace in this game, though when you are in melee with a bunch of enemies who are shooting ranged attacks at you will be less likely to hit you to begin with, so it's not as good as it sounds initially, though it is still pretty amazing, and this also works for your health and armor as far as I know. know. So I would always take this if you're taking things like Intimidating Aura, because Armor of Contempt, when you block a range attack, enemies with a 10-meter radius take the damage instead. This perk is not really good at all. It pretty much only kills Minoris, and even then, not very effectively. And you can take Shock and Awe. Enemies in a shock area take 25% more damage, but really to get the full effect of this, you'd have to also take Defensive Advantage, which is a perfectly timed parry or block. Creates a shock area for 5 seconds, cooldown is 30 seconds, and I would also take emergency countermeasures with that, and this perk is really good as well. We'll get into that in a second. But overall, I think these other 2 perks in this tree, with Armor Reinforcement being one of the best perks in the entire game, especially when we're using a fencing weapon and constantly getting gun strikes off, this is just way over having a defensive advantage that has a 30-second cooldown. And same thing with Steel Within, which is when your health is less than 50%, you take 30% less health damage. This is really, really good, especially if you're using a block weapon and you stack it with Conviction, which is when your armor is fully depleted, you take 25% less health damage for 10 seconds. When you combine all of these together for damage reduction, your damage reduction on this guy when your HP gets low, on top of his 30% bonus starting HP, because if you're unaware, HP in this game gets an increasing damage reduction the lower your total HP gets. So if you have 30% more HP as your starting HP, your effective HP with all of these damage reduction perks on top of having a bonus becomes absurd. And it's pretty much impossible to die, even if it looks like your HP is at like 20% on this guy, once you have all of these perks functioning. So really, damage reduction on this guy is more effective than most classes. Same thing with Vanguard now, with his bonus 15% from the Prestige perk, and he has a ton of other damage reduction perks. I'm pretty sure the Vanguard might actually have more damage reduction perks than the Bulwark does, or at least in some ways he does. But overall, the Bulwark is still better for damage reduction just because of how his starting HP functions and his block works. Now, next here, I would say Advanced Conditioning. Contested health fades 50% more slowly for all squad members. This is just one of the best perks in the game. Well, this is one of the best team perks, and this just makes it really easy to get your HP back with things like a power sword attack, or even like your charge shot and your plasma if you're taking plasma, though I do think heavy bolt pistol is currently better. And really, the other 2 options here are pretty trash, like Focus Restoration. Every 40 seconds, all squad members automatically restore 1 armor segment. This is just so terrible, to be honest. It's pretty self-explanatory how bad this is. And then here you have Effective Formation. All squad members take 20% less health damage from Extremis and Terminus level enemies. This is also pretty terrible. I don't really know what they're thinking with these other 2. These ones need like some serious buffs to ever be taken over this. I'm pretty sure I can count on like one hand how many times I've ever seen somebody actually take Effective Formation over Advanced Conditioning. Now, next here would be Purity of Purpose. The banner deals damage over time to enemies within its area of effect. This is really deceptively good. This pretty much puts a shock grenade down wherever your banner is, especially even if you're using things like Invigorating Icon, which is the best perk in this tree by far. This is still really good. Like, once you put this down, you will just kill every single Minoris around your banner so casually. It's pretty much like dropping an emergency countermeasure. And the other 2 options here, like Rapid Regeneration, the banner restores armor 300% faster, but duration is reduced to 10 seconds. I mean, the longer time your banner is out, the better, especially with how the armor works in this game, where if you're fighting anything in melee attacks will always take your armor off no matter how much damage the single instance of the melee attack will do. It will always take a full bar of your armor off first and then your HP. Ranged attacks will go through your armor, like they'll chunk your armor on top of your HP, but any melee hit coming for you will always take armor off first, even if you have a sliver of armor. So anything that gives you more armor for longer is better in this game, in my opinion. And things like Focus Strength, Shield Bash knocks enemies back and makes them lose control for a longer period of time. Shield Bash is really bad in this game and really breaks the flow of the Bulwark's combat in general. And also the other perk here, which I should mention, is Forward Momentum. After a Shield Bash, melee damage increases by 30% for 10 seconds. This was bugged as far as I know, and it might still be bugged, and if it's not, Shield Bash is still just not worth it over Intimidating Aura. This will do much more damage. So both of these perks are not worth taking in my opinion, and really Purity of Purpose is just the best one in this tree. Now, the next tree, Invigorating Icon. When the banner is activated, all squad members regain maximum contested health, but it recharges 50% slower. This perk is probably like a top 2 perk in the whole game. And maybe the best, honestly, maybe the best. This might be the best perk. The only one that's possibly competing with it is Battle Focus. And Battle Focus, to be like absolutely optimal, needs to have like 2 other perks all functioning in tandem with it. but this one is just busted off rip. So really, this perk is getting reworked. Like, that's not... So it's just happening. Unfortunately, Invigorating Icon for a lot of people is getting reworked. So if you don't want to take this, this is still definitely the meta pick. But if you don't want to take this, you can always just take Glorious Shield. All squad members within the banner's area of effect take 20% less damage, and the banner lasts 20% longer. First of all, I just want to say my personal opinion on this. I think Glorious Shield is a really, really fun perk to use, and it's also a lot healthier for the game in that, like, you're constantly putting down your banner, and like it functions more how I think they intended the Bulwark to work in the first place, which is that he's supposed to be like a beacon for your team to like actually like sit around and defend a banner, but like he really becomes more of like a portable like a medic beacon with Invigorating Icon. Especially now they made it recharge 50% slower, which pretty much just makes this guy like, or like your Bulwark player will just hold their banner forever, and it's just not really like within the spirit of the class in my opinion. So if you want to like kind of move away from Invigorating Icon because you just don't like it and you want to take Glorious Shield, this is still a super meta build here, and this still works really, really well. Obviously, Invigorating Icon is better because it's broken, and that's why it's getting reworked. So, you know, if you want to move off of it, take Glorious Shield. I think this one's a lot more fun personally, but, you know, you're always free to take Invigorating Icon if you want it. And this is the better perk, obviously. Now, as far as Concussive Force is concerned, Shield Bash deals 200% more damage. This is trash. Like, that's pretty self-explanatory. And these perks here, Rejuvenating Effect. When the banner is activated, it revives incapacitated squad members within its area of effect. I think this is pretty trash. I think this is one of the worst revive perks in the whole game. And also, usually when you plant your banner down, you're going to have an easy time getting up whoever's in your banner's radius anyways. So having an automatic effect for this, I don't think is remotely as valuable as saying all squad members in the banner's area of effect deal 20% more damage, because this is just a lot better. And these two perks here, like Purity of Purpose and Inspiration, they both function better with Glorious Shield because, again, your banner lasts 20% longer. And really, most of the revive perks in this game are pretty bad. Revive perks can be pretty good in games, but the only good one in this game is the Bonds of Brotherhood. Reviving a squad member restores them to full health, and they do less for you the better your teammates are. And this one is going to help your good teammates play even better when you put your banner down. So I would just take this all the time. In my opinion, I think this is a much better perk. Some people like this, but I really just think this isn't helping a whole lot. Now, next here will be these signature perks, or maybe I should mention Merciless Resolve. After a Shield Bash, okay, it's bad. Anything that says Shield Bash is bad. That's the takeaway here. Especially like knockdown effects, because of we don't really need that with the signature perks that we'll get into in a second. Now, Emergency Countermeasure. When your armor is fully depleted, a reserve shock grenade automatically detonates at your position. Cooldown is 90 seconds. This is a great perk, but this will also get things like a Ravener off of you in solo, and also things like Lictor, whatever grabs you, really. Like, if this drops, it will take them off of you. It's one of the only things in the entire game that can get a Lictor or Ravener off of you in solo. Now, you pretty much have to take Shock and Awe if you want like the full benefit out of this, and like you're not losing a ton from scramble targeting. Shock grenades are pretty strong on their own if you want to keep scramble targeting, or for whatever reason you want Armor of Contempt. Though Emergency Countermeasure, I would probably just take this with like a full-on shock build, and that's really what you want to build into. But overall, I don't think this is super valuable on its own. Excuse me, I do think this is super valuable on its own, and the cooldown also got reduced from 120 seconds to 90 seconds a little while ago. So if you want to take this, pretty good option, but I think it is significantly below the best option, which we'll get into in a second once we get past Defensive Mastery. A perfectly timed parry or block instantly incapacitates a Majoris or Extremis level enemy. Cooldown is 90 seconds. I think this is the worst perk in this tree because we're parrying all the time, and like half the time when you parry a Majoris, you're going to be running Intimidating Aura, and that Majoris is going to evaporate before your eyes, or the Extremis is going to evaporate before your eyes anyways, with like, what, a 5-second cooldown versus a 90-second cooldown. This is pretty much a worse version of Intimidating Aura, just like in practice, because 90 seconds, dude, you're going to kill like 5 Extremis pretty much if the game actually sent that at you with Intimidating Aura within that time period. So pretty much never take this over like Emergency Countermeasures, or what I think is the best here with Armored Advance. If you have armor remaining, you do not lose control upon taking heavy hits, and you cannot be knocked back. No knockback effects in this game are amazing because the things that actually kill you in this game are usually knockback effects. Not getting interrupted is super valuable, especially for things like gun strikes if you're using a parry weapon. So again, this really functions really well with our entire build, and we get armor back on armor reinforcement to begin with, and our banner. So this guy's a really easy time of pretty much maintaining armored advance 24/7. So I would say this is the best perk setup for him currently. You could also take it like this, like these two, but this is what I would personally take. But I know a lot of players like Invigorating Icon because they play with their friends, and they just like to heal for whatever reason. Well, the reason's pretty obvious, because they like to be alive. But, you know, if you want to take it like that, you sure can. I think this is the best setup for this, or this. Now, as far as prestige perks are concerned, his prestige perks are pretty damn good. Auxiliary Reload, melee kills of extremis level or higher enemies restore your secondary weapon's ammo by 1 magazine. I should say, I do have a whole video on the prestige perks, but I'll put that in like the little corner or something up here. But in case you want me to talk about them again here, I'm going to go over them very briefly. This works really well for your secondary weapon, which is, you know, your heavy bolt pistol or your plasma, because let's be real, these are the two weapons 99% of people are going to be taking, because Neo Volkite is like pretty incredibly mid, and the bolt pistol is pretty incredibly trash currently. And these two weapons have kind of power crept all the other sidearms. But if you want to take those other ones, you can, for whatever reason, if you just want to, like, you know, have fun. I say it like that's a bad thing. If you want to have fun, you can take whatever you want. I want to be clear that I'm not telling you what you have to take in this game. I'm just telling you what I think is optimal for winning. That's all I'm here to talk about, because it's your game. Use whatever you want. Now, as far as the other perks here go, Resilience, Medicae Stims, restore 40% more health. I think this is very good if you're not taking something like Invigorating Icon, but if you are taking Invigorating Icon, it's completely redundant. You just don't need this. And Overcharge, charge attack damage increases by 20%. This counts for anything that has you holding down your melee button, so this also counts for Power Rake, not Power Whirl on the Power Sword. I pretty much always take this now. And the same thing with Powerful Shot, range damage increases by 20%. These are both pretty boring effects, but they're also both really good effects. Having more range damage on a class that has very few instances of increased range damage is really good, and this just helps a lot with things like Plasma Pistol and things like the Heavy Bolt Pistol. Now, Masterful Defense, ability charge restored by 1% for every blocked range attack. This is an incredible perk, pretty much a must-take, and this makes your Invigorating Icon and your banner in general pretty much completely spammable, especially with your Invigorating Icon, because Invigorating Icon, whatever HP you're going to lose from blocking is going to be regained upon planting your banner that you just got back. And if you're fighting something like a Reaper Soul Cannon, like a Soul Reaper Cannon against Chaos, you can put out like 3 banners down in like a minute. So that's pretty absurd. Now, Standard Bearer. When Chapter Banner activates, you become invulnerable to damage for 2 seconds. Now, invulnerability isn't just like you take no damage here. This also means that you're completely immune. Like, you pretty much phase through enemy attacks during this. So it counts as like super knockback resist. This also pretty much guarantees that in those 2 seconds you can get back all of your Invigorating Icon HP. Though I would say that things like Masterful Defense, like Overcharge, taking these 4 is probably better for you than taking this. If you want to like swap around something here, you could like swap out Auxiliary Reload for like Resilience if you're not taking Invigorating Icon. But Auxiliary Reload, if you're playing in groups, this doesn't matter that much. If you're playing by yourself, this helps a lot. And this also helps more with the Plasma Pistol and the Heavy Bolt Pistol, mainly because the Heavy Bolt Pistol is like magazine based for 14 at max, or 8 if you're taking these versions, and the Plasma Pistol is percentage based. So you get more back for the Plasma Pistol, which comes out to like what? I think like 4 shots, maybe more. But overall, I would just say these like 5 up here are the best, and then Standard Bearer is like kind of meh, but you can take an Invigorating Icon if you really want to, and Rally Point's trash. Chapter Banner additionally removes negative status effects while active. Yeah, it's garbage. I'm just gonna be like, that's pretty self-explanatory. It's garbage. And if you are struggling with negative status effects in this game, you're probably better off taking things that like directly help you the whole time, in my opinion. Now, as far as weapons go, this might be the hottest take I have in this whole video, which is that I think the Power Sword is probably the single best weapon for this build currently, because the Power Sword did recently get buffed, and I think the Fencing Power Sword is the best fencing weapon in the game at the moment. I think, especially on Bulwark, I think it is over the Fencing Chainsword. Fencing Chainsword is quite slow. Same with the Relic Block version of the Chainsword. So if you want to go for Chainsword and like a block build, you can definitely take the Artificer one, because the speed and the way that block weapons function, where after you get like one adrenaline charge on perfect block for 30%, and then another one for 90%, the bonuses of the block adrenaline rush of the damage increase, those stay for like a second or so after you actually do your big adrenaline rush hit and regain your armor. So having more hits in with the actual chainsword here, it comes out to overall higher DPS, on top of just being way better at getting your contested HP back with like swift recovery. But today we're talking about the Power Sword, which I think this is the optimal setup for the Power Sword currently. Now, I kind of go back and forth on my Nora Slayer. I made a whole video about this where I said I think my Nora Slayer is pretty valuable. That might have been more so in like previous versions of the game, and I may have been like incorrect to say that because this doesn't actually hit breakpoints on my Norris currently. So like pretty much the same amount of hits as far as I know. I haven't tried it with every single version, but like as far as the fencing one's concerned, it will still take you like 3 hits to kill him even with this. So I really would take this. I don't really think the power restoration for like 100% more contested health is like really valuable on either of these, but it's still more valuable than hitting like 0 breakpoints. Now, as far as Power Fist is concerned, I don't think Power Fist is remotely as good on the actual Bulwark class as it is the Assault, because Assault hits far more breakpoints with all of his perks than the Bulwark does, because the Bulwark can't properly one-shot with this unless you're using like the block version, which kind of goes against our whole game plan with the intimidating aura. Anyways, that's pretty much all I have to say on the Bulwark class in this video. Really, you can use whatever fencing weapon you want, because fencing weapons and balanced weapons are simply carried by intimidating aura. I just think the Power Sword is the best fencing weapon in the game currently, and I think this is the best setup for the Bulwark class at the moment. So alright, it's time to talk about the Sniper class in patch 7.2 of Space Marine 2, his best perk setups, and what I think is currently his best build overall. Now, this class is in a very strong position currently. I would rank him the 3rd strongest in the game behind Tactical and Bulwark, and really that's because of his new prestige perks, his purification buffs, and Pattern of Excellence being kind of OP. But the first thing I really want to talk about with him would be the core perk tree, starting with Block Break. Shots will penetrate enemy block stances, dealing 50% of the usual damage. This is by no means a bad perk. I just don't rank this super high, mainly because this only works against Bone Sword Warriors, the Trigon, the Zangor Shield guys, and the Biovores for the most part. And really, 50% damage isn't super good in a lot of these weapons. That kind of like turns off our breakpoints, even with things like Targeted Shot on a last Fusel, and it makes us overall less ammo efficient when we're shooting guys, which is less of a problem than it used to be, because Versatile Precision is pretty damn OP. You can also take things like High Capacity. It's just that we do want to be mindful of our ammo at times, and 50% of the damage isn't like a super huge buff, and usually you're better off just waiting for them to open up their faceplates or just meleeing them down with things like Melee Mastery and Tactical Ambush, because this class actually does like a deceptively high amount of melee damage. So Block Break, not terrible, more like C tier. It does help sometimes, especially against Biovores, but for the most part, I haven't found this super valuable. Now, Melee Mastery. Melee damage increases by 20% against Majoris level and higher enemies. This is a pretty damn good amount of damage. 20% is hard to come by for melee bonus damage, and we already do a deceptively high amount of melee damage on this class with things like Adaptability, Tactical Ambush, with our Block Knife, because the Block Combat Knife is currently the best knife on this class, mainly because you have the speed and the crazy amount of damage with Adrenaline Rush charges on top of Shadow Stab that allows you to outright one-shot enemies in melee combat, even like Extremis enemies and Majoris. And this guy, in general, he doesn't really struggle with my Nora's Hordes that much, mainly because the Combat Knife has a pretty good setup with the Skull Crusher, on top of you having a bunch of very forgiving perks now, with things like Purification and Emperor's Grace for invulnerability. Now, Melee Mastery, pretty good. I'd say it's A tier, not like an S tier perk, because you don't really have to take this. It just happens to be the best in this tree, in my opinion, because Medicae Adept, you revive squad members 30% faster. This is a pretty trash tier perk, because like if somebody's going down so often that you're going to need to get them up 30% faster, they're probably not contributing a ton to begin with, and really revive speed is hardly a problem in this game in the first place. I think I can count on like one hand how many times I've been in a squad where like, oh my god, I can't get them up because I'm just not fast enough. And like usually people aren't going down that much anymore to begin with, and if they are, like I said before, they're probably not contributing a ton to begin with. Now, High Capacity, the maximum amount of ammo you can carry increases by 10%. More ammo is good. This class has some low ammo capacity for some of the weapons, especially things like the Bolt Sniper. This is not terrible by any means. I do take this thing with things like the fire rate versions of Last Fusel, fire rate versions of the Bolt Sniper. High Capacity can definitely be useful. People really seem to like Vantage Point. Remaining stationary for 2 seconds increases your ranged weapons damage by 20%. That is pretty good. 20% is a hefty chunk of damage. I just think it's kind of awkward to have to sit there for 2 seconds. And oftentimes, this game will have you moving a lot. Even if you're just trying to like dodge incoming range fire, you're either forced to move, usually doing like little pop shots or like pot shots with this class to begin with. And like being forced to stay stationary for 2 seconds, that is quite a long period of time. I don't really use this perk ever. And there are some breakpoints this can hit. I just think it's a little bit awkward. I think it's kind of like the antithesis of the sniper's playstyle to begin with, because sniper really is more like a melee slap fest on top of like dashing in and out of your cloak to get like insta kill headshots. That's really the best way to play him on the highest difficulties, especially if you're in solo. Like if you just look at any like the highest true solo clears on this class, you'll just see that's how everybody's using him, because it's just how he's best at the moment. So vantage point, not horrific if you're playing in teams, pretty trash if you're trying to do like the ultimate meta build. Now, adaptability, reloading while having low ammo or manually activating camo cloak increases melee damage by 25% for 10 seconds. 25% more melee damage is a lot. 10 seconds is a pretty big uptime, and activating camo cloak is usually when you're going to be using your tactical ambush to begin with. So this should definitely help you just like one-shot things like Majora's, one-shot things like Extremis, and even go after stuff like the boss spawns like Hive Tyrant, even the Trigun at times. So adaptability, pretty good. These are the two perks I usually swap between, and I kind of skip over Vantage Point. Now, Iron Grip. Weapon spread and recoil are reduced by 20%, and range damage against terminus level enemies is increased by 15% for both sniper rifles and stalker bolt rifles. Pretty boring perk, but also like the only perk you're ever going to take in this tree if you're using a bolt sniper or a stalker bolt rifle, because dexterous hands, bolt carbines reload 20% faster, and their weapon spread and recoil reduced by 15%. This does nothing for you if you're using a stalker bolt rifle or a bolt sniper, and vice versa for the bolt carbines, because these are just like weapon specific perks. And really, I think these things should be like turned into like either passive abilities for the actual weapons that are helping out here, because like there's no choice here. It's just a non-choice tree. Like lethal efficiency here, killing more than one enemy with one shot from a last fusel resources charged by 1. You're always going to take this if you have a last fusel. You're always going to take this if you have a bolt carbine, and you're always going to take this if you're using a bolt rifle. So I think this is kind of boring. Probably rework these, probably just incorporate them into the actual weapons, in my opinion. Now, as far as team perks are concerned, headshot damage increases by 10% for all squad members. Now, this is I'm pretty sure this is a multiplicative perk for like on top of your base damage, mainly because marksmanship. I've tried to use this with things like the stalker bolt rifles, like 20% headshot damage on low HP, and I'm pretty sure the weapon perks can affect the actual base damage of the weapon, and this is on top of that. At least that's how it feels, because this 10% headshot damage increase is not nearly as noticeable as some of the weapon perks are, in my experience. Now, precision targeting, weapon spread is reduced by 25%, and range damage against extremis level enemies is increased by 10% for all squad members. I think this is pretty poor, and I really think like this whole extremis bonus should be like a damage increase to Majora's and up, because we already have like 15% damage bonuses on things like the tactical to range for your entire team, and this is just so much better than this perk on the sniper. And sniper is like a allegedly dedicated range class, even though he's really more of a hybrid class these days. But precision targeting, probably the weakest perk here. I would take both of these over, like both marksmanship and squad renewal over it, though squad renewal is by far the best here, with a headshot kill restores ability charge by 10% for any squad member. I think this is just the one that everyone's always going to take forever. These two should probably be reworked, if we're being honest, mainly because squad renewal just does too much. And it's so good that you don't even have to take the actual gear perk here for renewal. A headshot kill restores camo cloaks charged by 15%, because this just makes up for that entirely. And your gear perk tree has some of the best perks in this game already, with things like Purification. Manually activating camo cloak removes negative status effects and restores all contested health. This perk is S tier. This is such a good perk. It makes things like boss fights tremendously easy. It gets you out of situations where you usually lose all of your contested health. If you combine this with things like Emperor's Grace, when camo cloak activates, you become invulnerable to damage for 2 seconds. You can pretty much just live through anything. This class is very, very hard to kill with Purification, and this perk is just goated. And the fact it also removes negative status effects, this is like the only good perk that has that effect attached to it, because like it's just like a little bonus. So Purification, S tier. I would pretty much always take that take this perk these days because it's just that good. I have taken Efficient Readiness previously. Camo Cloak increases movement speed by 20%, and manually activating Camo Cloak automatically reloads ranged weapons. This is pretty good with the Bolt Carbine because you can pretty much just shoot your gun indefinitely, because I have used this quite a bit with the Bolt Carbine, and I do like it. I do think it is very good, and like when you have like a perk setup like this or something, for the Bolt Carbine, it's quite efficient. It's just that Purification's too good to not take, in my opinion. And same thing with Renewal. A headshot kill restores Camo Cloak's charge by 15%. If you combine these two together, it's 25%, and that's a pretty enormous chunk of Camo Cloak recharge. But Camo Cloak already comes back pretty easily alone with Squad Renewal because, you know, Minoris, like Hormagaunts, Termagants, and Zangors already so ever-present in this game that you just get this constantly anyways, especially with a Bolt Carbine. So that's my opinion on this portion of the gear tree. Purification, just top tier. Now, Guardian Protocol. When you are reviving a squad member, Camo Cloak hides you and the squad member for 5 seconds without spending the charge. Cooldown is 30 seconds. This is a trash tier perk, especially considering the tree it's in with targeted shot and tactical ambush for bonus damage on ranged weapons and melee weapons, respectively, out of Cloak. This is just something you're never going to take. Guardian Protocol is trash. You're honestly trolling if you take this perk. It's just trash tier. And like really revive perks in this game are almost always trash tier outside of Bond of Brotherhood, because really all they're helping are like the worst possible players on your team usually. And that might sound harsh, but like this game, most people aren't going down if they know what they're doing, and the people that are going down constantly, like this is not the thing that's going to save them or you, because you're probably going to help them more by just doing damage to the things that are killing them or going to kill you anyways. And this also helps you hit breakpoints. Targeted shot here with the 75% more damage from ranged attacks out of Cloak. This helps hit breakpoints of things like Last Fusel and Bolt Sniper. This is pretty meta, and a tactical ambush will straight up one-shot Extremis and do absurd amounts of damage to Terminus enemies. So really these two perks, super mandatory on this class, and Guardian Protocol, super trash. Now, Persistence. When Camo Cloak deactivates, you take 20% less health damage, do not lose control upon taking heavy hits, and cannot be knocked back for 10 seconds. This is a super goated perk, and I slept on this for a long time, but having a no knockback effect on this class is pretty rare. They used to have one for him with his Indomitable Spirit, which is like the no knockback on gun strikes. This used to be Adrenaline Boost, which is the perk Assault has now. They swapped them over, which is, you know, for perfectly timed parry, block, or dodge, you get no knockback. But now Sniper kind of got nerfed in that regard, because they're like, oh, wait a second, we don't want this guy to be a melee class, so they just gave him Indomitable Spirit. And this perk is pretty trash tier comparatively. And Persistence is really good because this is no knockback and less damage upon hitting one button that you get back all the time. So Camo Cloak, really good already. Persistence, really good. 20% less health damage is a pretty hefty chunk of damage reduction when you need it the most, especially when it's on command. Unfortunately, when you have Emperor's Grace active, this only becomes like 8 seconds of benefit because, first of all, Emperor's Grace, when you're invulnerable here, you are not just invulnerable to damage. You will not be moved or like touched by anything in the game. You can literally charge up your Shadow Stab while this is active, and you will just not get knocked over at all because these 2 seconds count as like you just being removed from the game. So this is really only 8 seconds of no knockback with that, and 8 seconds of 20% less health damage because, once again, you are invulnerable for 2 seconds with Emperor's Grace. But still really good because 8-second uptime is huge. Now, Lingering Concealment. After performing an attack that breaks Camo Cloak, you remain hidden for 2 seconds. This is a really good perk. It's just unfortunate this is currently bugged with Emperor's Grace, as far as I know, where if you use these two perks in conjunction, your Camo Cloak will just drain indefinitely. It will not just stop after the 2 seconds, and it's pretty terrible. I know it's unfortunate. You just can't use these two perks together at the moment, so I've moved back to Persistence. I have used Lingering Concealment in the past. This used to be way better with things like the Shadow Stab on the Block Knife and Tactical Ambush, because prior to, like, I think it was patch 6, no, it was patch 7, the melee damage, or the melee break on Cloak from Shadow Stab, would break your Cloak the moment you started charging your weapon. So this would start the 2 seconds of concealment from Lingering Concealment and lets you recharge your Camo Cloak while you're charging your Shadow Stab. That is no longer the case. Now your Camo Cloak will break once you actually release the button for Shadow Stab, which is better to actually get the full Camo Cloak damage effect on the double charge of Shadow Stab. Just, it's worse to actually keep your Cloak up, so it's quite a bit of a nerf in my opinion. So overall, Lingering Concealment, still a good perk, just can't use it with this, and it's worse on melee weapons than it used to be. It used to be a lot better. Now, Ambush. When Camo Cloak deactivates, it startles nearby enemies. They will temporarily lose control or get knocked back. Cooldown is 25 seconds. 25-second cooldown is horrendous in this game. It's just way too long for something like this. And startling nearby enemies is not remotely as good as, just dealing like an AoE damage to them. If this did like an AoE damage, this would be a goated perk. Unfortunately, it doesn't. And 25-second cooldown is pretty unacceptable, in my opinion, for like a perk effect this mid. So I would stick with these two. Now, as far as signature perks go, Evasion. After a perfectly timed dodge, Camo Cloak automatically activates without spending charge for 5 seconds. Cooldown is 30 seconds. This perk is pretty good. It's just that Evasion has way too long of a cooldown with 30 seconds. And really, hot take, if they want this perk to be remotely as good as Pattern of Excellence, which is performing 3 consecutive headshots, restores equipment charged by 1, cooldown is 30 seconds, they're going to have to like remove the cooldown on this entirely or make it like 5 seconds. Or, just remove it from the just make sure your Camo Cloak 5 seconds is the entire cooldown, because even then it still might not be remotely as good as like having a 30-second melt-a-bomb the entire game, because this perk just needs some buffs. I'm gonna be honest, both of these do, really, because Emergency Override, when you receive lethal damage, Camo Cloak automatically activates without spending a charge and you become invulnerable for 5 seconds. Cooldown is 180 seconds. Both of these are significantly worse than Pattern of Excellence, because Pattern of Excellence is like one of the best perks in the entire game. 30-second melt-a-bombs, 30-second shock grenades, 30-second crack grenades. That is so much value. Equipment recharge perks are already some of the best perks in this entire game, and this is the best equipment recharge perk in the entire game. So see where we're going with this, in that this is a god tier perk. Pattern of Excellence, completely broken, OP, amazing perk, always take this. Now we will talk about the Sniper's Prestige perks very briefly here. I have already mentioned Emperor's Grace in this video. When Camo Cloak activates, you become invulnerable to damage for 2 seconds, on top of having 0 knockback from anything in this game. You basically don't exist. S tier perk, incredible synergy with purification. Awesome stuff. Just always take this. Versatile Precision, also awesome stuff. Performing a kill with your secondary weapon restores 15% if your primary weapon's ammo. Cooldown is 15 seconds. This perk pretty much just gives you a perfect ammo economy on every single weapon this guy can possibly have. This outright fixed both sniper builds and outright fixed rate of fire builds for like the Stalker bolt rifle and the last fusel. You can take whatever you want when you have this perk, because you pretty much never run out of ammo if you're properly conserving. Versatile Precision might be nerfed one day, cooldown being 15 seconds for an effect this powerful. Kind of low, but as of right now, it's just a non-choice. You just take this perk. It's that good. Boosted Recharge. Collecting an armor boost restores ability charge by 100%. Trash tier perk. Armor boost is already like not super common in this game. There's no guarantee you're going to be the one to take it. And if you do take it, there's no guarantee that you even need your ability when you do. And really, this class has 0 issue with the Camo Cloak in the first place, because we have 2 ability recharge perks on our base tree. Versatility. After switching weapons, your secondary weapon deals 20% more damage. The effect lasts until reloading or switching back to your primary weapon. Not great, not terrible. It's, damage is damage. 20% on your secondary is not horrific. We swap quite a bit in this class. It's just, I don't really put this over things like Conviction or Exacting Focus. Indomitable Spirit. While performing a gun strike, you do not lose control upon taking heavy hits. You cannot be knocked back. This is a good no knockback effect, because we have pretty much no knockback effects on this class. This is just the worst version of this perk in the whole game, especially compared to things like Adrenaline Boost. And when we take it to stuff like Persistence, when Camo Cloak deactivates, you take 20% less health damage, you don't lose control, plus taking heavy hits, it can be knocked back for 10 seconds on command. I think that's much better than Indomitable Spirit, though if you aren't taking Persistence, I would just take Indomitable Spirit, because, it's one of the only options you have, though you can just omit it entirely if you want to. Conviction. When your armor is fully depleted, you take 25% less health damage for 15 seconds. This perk is really goated. 25% less health damage is huge, especially when your armor breaks, because when your armor breaks, that's when you actually start taking the health damage to begin with, and 15 seconds is a long uptime. All the other versions of Conviction are only 10 seconds, and I think that's mainly because this class only has 2 armor, and it's not really intended to be in melee as much as the other classes in the first place. You also have a bunch of like get out of jail free cards with like your Camo Cloak in the first place. So Conviction, good in all classes it's on. I would pretty much always take this. Super underrated perk. Exacting Focus. After a gun strike, you deal 20% more range damage for 10 seconds. Even if you're just using the block knife, which most people really should be at this point, this perk is still god tier, still incredible. It's just 20% more range damage. Sometimes even hit some breakpoints with this. So if you really want to use this, I would take Emperor's Grace. Versatility. versatile precision, conviction, and exacting focus. That's how I build my sniper. I think this works pretty fine. I never really feel like I'm missing anything with Indomitable Spirit versatility, especially not boosted recharge. That's just my opinion. If you want to take something else, if you want to choose between these two, you sure can. Now, for Sniper's strongest build currently, I do still think it is the last Fusel. There are some other perk options you can take here over these, things like Vantage Point or Adaptability depending over the high capacity perk, but really the rate of fire last Fusel is so good on us now because of versatile precision and our ability to have basically infinite ammo, and this is the perk setup I like to take on the weapon perks here. Alternatively, from the beam radius, you could just take the faster charge shot rate, though I really don't think this is necessary anymore because the rate of fire variant is already so good on us. And really we don't have an ammo economy issue to begin with, and beam radius pretty much just makes this weapon our horde clear on its own, which is kind of ridiculous on this gun, but that's just how the last Fusel works in the first place. And as far as secondaries go, heavy bolt pistol is definitely over the Inferno pistol. Once you really get better with Sniper, you start to realize that the Inferno pistol horde clear really is not remotely necessary on this guy, especially with his buffs to purification and how good the block knife skull crusher are, because if you hold down like one tap on the combat knife and then you hold down the heavy attack, you get to slap them around, set up gun strikes quite easily. I might make a video on that one day, but overall this class really isn't as hard to melee down minors as people seem to think. But if you want to take fencing, you sure can, because most of your damage on this class to begin with this build setup will come from the last Fusel. Alright, it's time to talk about the Vanguard class in patch 7.2 as Space Marine 2. His best perks, what I think is one of his best build setups overall currently. The Vanguard really is blessed with an abundance of amazing perks. He's kind of like the tactical in that regard, and really this guy has been in a strong position since the launch of the game. That's no different here with the patch 7.0 prestige perk update. And the main thing I want to go through here would be his core perks, team perks, gear perks, signature perks, and I'll cover like what I think is one of his best builds at the moment. But primarily this is supposed to be a perk tree video, starting with moving target. Each melee attack you land reduces the range damage you take by 2% up to 20%. If you do not land a melee attack for 5 seconds, the effect ends. I've used this perk quite a bit, especially against Chaos, and when you stack it in conjunction with things like close combat focus, restless fortitude, and the positive synergy it has with the combat knife perk hard target for 15% less range damage during a light combo, it does pretty much let you ignore range damage, and that's quite useful. I just don't think this perk on its own is as useful as the other things in this tree, and these other range damage reduction bonuses are kind of better than this thing individually, and really it isn't that necessary to be used in conjunction with them in the first place. Now, melee mastery. Melee damage increases by 10% against Majora's level and higher enemies. This perk is pretty good. 10% melee damage is hard to come by as a flat bonus. It's just that this perk is a worse version of the other version of this perk on the sniper class. It's a 20% increase, and really I don't put this over upper hand, which is after a perfectly timed parry, block, or dodge. You do not lose control upon taking heavy hits, and you cannot be knocked back for 10 seconds. Now, in Space Marine 2, the no knockback effect is so valuable primarily because the only things that actually one-shot you in this game, besides like accidentally blowing yourself up, are stuff like the good old zoanthrope balls chain stunning you, bone sword warriors double teaming you and just whacking you into oblivion, and this pretty much stops all of that while you are actually having this perk effect active. I take this on every single class I can. It also lets you get things off like your block charges on your chain sword or your knife, because if you have 2 adrenaline charges, you'll pretty much be able to whack through them regardless, as long as you have the no knockback effect, because this does stop like 90% of attacks in this game from knocking you over or making you move, which is really useful. S tier perk. Now, Duelist, perfect parry and perfect block windows increase by 50%. I've used this perk in the past. It does help sometimes by catching like things at the very end of your parry window you would otherwise be unable to, but really in the vanilla game, if you're not playing with increased spawns or any mods like that, this doesn't happen that often, and for the most part, this is just like a win more perk, because the parry windows in this game are very forgiving. Like perfect parry on a fencing weapon has a 40 frame parry already, which is enormous, and perfect block is half of that with 20 active frames. Either way, both of those parry windows are very good, and you really don't need something like this in my opinion. Duelist is not super valuable once you actually learn the timings on the weapons, and honestly it can teach you some bad habits by like you swap off this class and the timings are all different for like the different weapons, which is not great. Now, Close combat focus, you take 20% less range damage. Pretty boring effect, but this is very useful against chaos primarily because like 90% of the damage you take against chaos is going to be range damage. It's just like 100% uptime, especially now that we have like armor regen on command with our prestige perks, which we'll get into eventually. But overall, I take close combat focus all the time against chaos. I think it is better than conviction in my opinion, or at least has like, a greater uptime. That's my logic there. Now, conviction is also amazing because when your armor is fully depleted, you take 25% less health damage for 10 seconds. Now, the way this game works is, when your armor's gone, that's when you start getting smacked in the face to begin with. So having less health damage upon like when you actually need it the most, that is really good in this game. 10 seconds is a pretty long uptime on any perk effect in this game. Conviction and close combat focus are both very viable perks here, and really I can't fault you for taking either versus chaos or Tyranids. Now, retribution. After you are grabbed or not back, you deal 25% more melee damage for 15 seconds. This perk, 25% more melee damage is a pretty fat buff. 15 seconds is a pretty fat uptime. I like this perk a lot, to be honest. I don't think it is super meta because it does require you to like fuck up, but let's be real, you mess up in this game all the time because you are a human being, and this is something that's just going to happen to you regardless, and sometimes you get knocked over just because of things that are completely out of your control. So retribution, pretty good. If you just want more melee damage, this is a pretty damn good perk, especially with things like the chainsword. Now, what is a really good perk is consecutive execution. Killing 7 enemies in rapid succession restores equipment charge by 1. Cooldown is 90 seconds. Equipment in this game is so valuable. A Melt-A-Bomb can wipe out an Extremis pack all on its own. This was recently buffed to only require 7 enemies instead of 10, and really a 90-second cooldown is not super long in this game, and not as good as like Sniper's Pattern of Excellence, but overall, consecutive execution still an S tier perk. Melt-A-Bombs and crack grenades and shock grenades, they just carry encounters and they will body entire enemy packs. It's just a great perk. I pretty much always take this. Now, what is a pretty big noob trap here with honed reactions. When your health is less than 50%, your perfect dodge window is doubled. This sounds good until you realize that this class is not super useful with a perfect dodge to begin with, and perfect dodging really isn't that hard on its own. And the biggest negative of this perk is that it has a anti-synergy with the class purpose, which is to heal yourself, because 99% of players playing the Vanguard class are going to be taking either Adrenaline Rush or Unmatched Zeal, so they are not going to be below 50% HP for very long. So the actual uptime on this perk is pretty much non-existent in most matches, especially if you are playing well, and when it is active, it's not doing a whole lot for you. I would pretty much never take this. I think this perk needs a buff. Maybe just make it like a flat-out 25% increased perfect dodge window, because honestly, compared to these two, that might be a little bit more viable. Now, team perks. Melee champion, all squad members deal 15% more melee damage. This perk is pretty good. And really, this perk is only bad because it is outclassed by the other two team perks in this tree, because on its own, 15% more melee damage, that's not a bad perk choice. It's just that Unmatched Zeal for 30% more HP on a Terminus or Extremis level kill is just incredible. This is probably the best perk in this entire tree, period. This grants healing to classes that don't have it at all, like Assault, Sniper, and the Tactical, and Unmatched Zeal is just a goated perk. Pretty much always take this. I would actually rank this way above Adrenaline Rush at this point. And Inner Fire, this did receive a nerf. All squad members can restore ability charge by 15% by performing finishers on Majora's level or higher enemies. This is still really good with, like, the perk synergy on things like Banner for Invigorating Icon, Auspex Scan at times. It's just that healing your team in a game with limited healing is just so valuable, and perks like this are why Invigorating Icon is getting nerfed in the first place, because it pretty much just says every Extremis is a medkit, and this perk scales higher and higher depending on the higher difficulty you are playing on, because you're fighting more Extremis and potentially more Terminus in the next patch. So Unmatched Zeal, very, very good. Absolute god tier perk and over these other two. Now, for the gear perks here, we have Restless Fortitude. After a diving kick, you take 40% less range damage for 10 seconds. 40% less range damage is a huge chunk of damage reduction, and 10 seconds is a huge chunk of uptime. And this perk is pretty amazing against Chaos especially. Unfortunately, this perk does have a negative perk interaction with the build for the grapnel execution, because your finishers, at least previously, did not count for the proccing of this 40% reduction. reduction, which is kind of unfortunate, but, really you're going to be using this for things like Adrenaline Rush instead for that reason. Now, Shockwave. Diving Kick additionally deals damage in a 5-meter radius. I've never felt this damage do a ton for me outside of, Removed Bramble, but, I have also never felt collateral damage do a ton for me besides kicking people in the face. So both these perks I think are pretty mid, but Shockwave I do think is better just because the AoE, it hits everything around you. It clears out Bramble, and clearing out Bramble is pretty useful, especially with how high the Bramble Vine Warriors are currently. Now, collateral damage, Diving Kick deals 10% more damage and additionally damages enemies on the way to the grapnel launcher's target. I have very rarely ever seen this damage increase be notable whatsoever, and really, I think this perk kind of sucks because it just does nothing in my experience. Maybe you think it's really good, maybe you've had a different experience with it, but overall, pretty D tier in my opinion. I just take Shockwave to clear Bramble. Now, Zone of Impact. Performing a finisher with the grapnel launcher deals damage to nearby enemies. This damage is super noticeable. This thing will absolutely wipe enemies like Zoanthropes in the sky, Majoris around you, pretty much every single Minoris in a pack. Super positive synergy with Tactical Prowess for your automatic refill on a 33% execute, or really any grapnel finisher. Pretty much always take these two perks together. If you're using Zone of Impact, you're using a grapnel execute build with Tactical Prowess. That's just how it is. And Zone of Impact, I would honestly go as far as say it's like an S tier perk for this build in particular, just because this damage is pretty crazy and you can loop entire packs. Now, Tenacity. After killing 7 enemies in rapid succession, Diving Kick's damage increases by 40% for 15 seconds. This is a god-awful perk. This thing should be changed entirely. It's pretty self-explanatory how bad this perk is. I would honestly like to see the actual stats on how many people are using this, because it must be sub 10% of all Vanguard players. This perk is trash. Now, Tip of the Spear. Enemies hit by Diving Kick take 15% more range damage for 10 seconds. This is a pretty damn good perk, really good against Chaos, really good synergy with Restless Fortitude and Adrenaline Rush if you're going for this kind of build, because you just go into their face and you shoot them in the face, and guess what? You do more damage. And with us, our best weapon at the moment are the Oculus Bolt Carbine, and the Bolt Carbine and the headshot multipliers on this kind of go through the roof when you use things like Tip of the Spear, so pretty S tier. I take this all the time when I'm not taking a grapnel finisher build, and alternatively, if you're doing a grapnel finisher build, you're taking Zone of Impact anyways. Now, Thrill of the Fight. After a perfectly timed parry, block, or dodge, you take 20% less health damage for 5 seconds. I love this perk, mainly because this perk tree kind of sucks anyways, but overall, Thrill of the Fight, pretty great stuff. 20% less health damage is a lot for us, and pretty much we lose our armor all the time on this class anyways, and this is really good for us because our contested health recovery on this 50% increase is already super, super good. So if we have no armor, we're not in the worst position ever. This just makes that contested health recovery that much more valuable, because we're getting the damage reduction and we're getting our contested health back more easily. So overall, I think this is pretty A tier. I take this all the time now. This is a perk I used to take with Grim Determination when grapnel launcher is in cooldown. Weapon damage increases by 15%. Unfortunately, this perk only activates when both charges of your grapnel launcher are used up, which is pretty shitty in my opinion, because 15% is just not up that often. And if you're using an execute build, you're not going to even have a grapnel down all that often to begin with. And using both your charges is already pretty stupid for the most part. But Grim Determination, if you're using an Adrenaline Rush build, it's not the worst thing ever. I just think it's kind of low value just because of that one aspect of it, especially when you can just have less damage, which equals you dying less. Now, Combat Readiness, Grapnel Launcher recharges 20% faster. It's just a 20% increase. It's pretty noticeable. Pretty good perk. Both these perks aren't unusable. It's just that I think currently Thrill of the Fight is better overall. But, if you want to take these two, you sure can. Alright, it's time to talk about these signature perks, starting off with the absolute mouthful of a perk, Tactical Prowess. Grapnel Launcher can activate a finisher not only on incapacitated enemies, but also on those who have less than 33% health, except Terminus level. And performing a finisher with the Grapnel Launcher restores its charge. This perk is pretty damn goated with Zone of Impact. It's just unfortunate that it has so many bugs around it, because sometimes you won't get the finisher, sometimes you'll get the AoE of Zone of Impact and won't get your charge back, and you won't even get your armor back. And seeing hitting the actual threshold of 33% health can kind of be hard sometimes. However, you can use the lock-on mechanic in this game. So if you lock on to an enemy and you stick a little red dot around their lock-on target, that means they're at 33% health or below. So keep that in mind. Overall, this is pretty A tier, would be S tier if it weren't for bugs, in my opinion, but still very useful, still very good. Now, Emperor's Blessing. Taking lethal damage restores all armor instead of incapacitating you. Cooldown's 120 seconds. So basically, every 2 minutes you don't die, and that's pretty good. I just think these two are better, because Adrenaline Rush will help you more in like an immediate fight, and Tactical Prowess will help you more in killing the thing that's trying to kill you in the first place. These two prevent you from dying more than this one, ironically, in my opinion, and really I think they outclass it in a lot of ways. Though if you really want to take this, you can. I just think it's the weakest of these options. Now, Adrenaline Rush. Melee kills of Majora's level or higher enemies restore health by 5%. This used to be 10%. They nerfed it, then they buffed this perk up from like what was 5% or something, maybe like 3%, up to 30%. So this was a huge buff to this perk, and now Adrenaline Rush is still S tier, just not as good. Either way, you can take both of these and your healing will be absolutely absurd. And really, I think as far as like the meta build for like most players would go, this is probably it. This is a pretty good perk setup for any level of player skill, and really this class is quite forgiving because it has everything it needs to keep you alive. More contested health on melee hits, more HP regen in a game with limited healing, 2 perks for it now, and more damage reduction than most guys, and also things like an increased parry window. So this is what I would take as a setup, like a basic perk setup. This pretty much works with like any type of build you want to do on this class, to be honest, any weapon setup. Just overall, very powerful stuff. Now, I'm going to talk about his prestige perks here for a second. Number 1, Battlefield Awareness. If a target is within 8 meters, you deal 10% more range damage. This guy doesn't have a ton of good options on his prestige perks. Well, he actually has 4 good options and then like 2 mid ones. So really, Battlefield Awareness, if a target is within 8 meters, you deal 10% more range damage. That's good. More range damage in this game is just always good. It's kind of hard to come by, to be honest, and this guy is pretty much always within 8 meters of a target because you have a grapnel launcher. Pretty much always take this. Now, Exigency Charge. When your health is less than 25%, ability charge regenerates 15% faster. Absolute trash tier perk, especially on this class, because first of all, our grapnel recharge really isn't a big issue to begin with, and when you're below 25% health in this class, it probably lasts like a whopping 5 seconds, because you have Unmatched Zeal and you have Adrenaline Rush with most players, because I would say like 90% of players are probably still taking Adrenaline Rush, and maybe a little bit less than that, because people do have moved to Tactical Prowess a bit, but overall, this class, anything that has you be sitting, like has you sit at a lower HP on the Vanguard class, it's just not going to be very good because it's a negative class synergy. So I don't really know what they were thinking with this. Honestly, they probably weren't, but Exigency Charge, pretty F tier. Indomitable Spirit. While performing a gun strike, you do not lose control upon taking heavy hits, and you cannot be knocked back. If you want to be the ultimate no knockback boy, you could take this perk with upper hand, and you'll pretty much never get knocked over again off a perfect parry. It's just kind of redundant if we have upper hand, though, which is why I put it in like C tier, probably like D tier, to be honest. It's probably like the worst version of a knockback perk in this game, but no knockback is still as powerful as ever, and gun strikes do get you knocked around sometimes. Fortitude. Health increases by 15%. Pretty boring effect, but health is super valuable in this game because, like I've mentioned multiple times, whenever your HP is low in this game, you have a base damage resist that goes up. So if your total HP is higher, your effective HP is that much more when you're at low HP, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does, but overall, Fortitude, really damn good. Also, the way medkits work in this game, for some people who are confused, this doesn't mean like you don't heal your mortal wound off of 2 medkits anymore. This just means like your total HP is higher, and really the way medkits work in this game as well is a 30% heal. It's not really based on like your total HP, so this won't like break that break point for the mortal wound. Sorry, that was a mouthful. It was a really weird way to say that, but anyways, hopefully you get what I'm saying. A launch for restoration. Using the grapnel launcher restores 1 armor segment. This is pretty goated. This is on command armor regen, and the way armor works in this game is as long as you have any amount of armor, the next melee hit will do literally nothing to your HP no matter what. So that is pretty amazing. And having any on command armor restore in this game, goated. And this just means you get armor when you want it the most, which is when you were diving in on an enemy. And if you take this and you have Tactical Prowess, this will proc on the Tactical Prowess Execute for 2 full armor restores. That's all of our armor. This pretty much just gets you all of your armor back. Now, Restoration. Killing 7 enemies in rapid succession restores 1 armor segment. Cooldown is 15 seconds. That is a pretty good perk, not as good as Launch Restoration in my opinion, but Armor Restore, that's like a little bit of a drip feed, ain't bad in this game. Cooldown is 15 seconds, that's pretty bad, not gonna lie, like I wish it was like 10 or something. Either way, more armor is more armor, and I rank this far higher than, say, Well-Equipped, Indomitable Spirit, or Exigency Charge. And really, some people like Well-Equipped for an equipment damage increase by 20%, but this only hits one breakpoint with the Crack Grenade, and really, Crack Grenades already one-shot most of the things you actually want them to do. By most of the things, I mean, they one-shot Sorcerers already, and that's like the biggest issue in this game for like most grenades in the first place. And really, like the Zoanthrope stuff, you can already just like one-shot them immediately after tossing a Crack Grenade on them. Not super valuable, and like Shock Grenades, normal grenades, and Melt-A-Bombs. Melt-A-Bombs already one-shot. Grenades are usually used for stuns, and Shock Grenades already kill and slow down the things you want them to, so I do not rank this very highly over these four. Now, moving on to weapons, I would say the two best weapons currently on this class are the Bolt Carbine and the Oculus Bolt Carbine. Now, Bolt Carbine has the fastest TTK of any weapon on the Vanguard currently, especially with all of like his new range damage buffs. Unfortunately, the only negative of the Bolt Carbine is it has like no real instant reload mechanic outside of Gunstrike reload, but this isn't like super necessary. If you want to use the Oculus for its finisher reload, that is a bit better, but overall, I'd say it's Bolt Carbine currently as the best weapon with this setup. Now, as for the best secondary on Vanguard, it is once again the Heavy Bolt Pistol. I know, common theme. This gun is just kind of cracked right now. It really is the best sidearm in the game, and really when you're building it, you just want to go down damage, damage, damage for headshot damage, because all you want on this thing is damage. More gun strike damage, more headshots, more boom, more victory. Because right now, the Heavy Bolt Pistol has the highest gun strike damage of any weapon in this game, including things like the Plasma Pistol. This thing just slaps. Like, there's really no other way to put it. The Heavy Bolt Pistol is just the goat. And really, Neo Volkite Pistol isn't horrific on this class. I use it against Chaos quite a bit to pop little cultist brains, or really more like detonate their everything. But overall, Heavy Bolt Pistol is better, and especially if you're taking something like the Melter Rifle for whatever reason, and you don't have like a super good range primary, this one makes up for your range primary very easily. I'm actually kind of shocked they gave this to everyone. But I digress. As for melee weapons, the Artificer Blockchain Sword to take more advantage on our heavy hits while our block charges are up. This one's the best in this game. It makes your horde clear super good, probably like the overall best melee weapon in the entire game, not just block weapons. Like, this one just does work. And the way block weapons work is that once you get your 2 charges of perfect block, the first one gives you a 30% increase in your next melee hit, second one is 90%, and if you get like 2 charges at once into the Adrenaline Rush Explosion, those buffs will stay for like a second or so. So the faster Chainsword will get more attacks off than the Relic version was, even though the base damage is higher on the Relic one. This one really doesn't matter, like the speed is more important. And like, I'm just telling you this from like the playtime I've had this thing, and really you can just watch videos of this. The only thing this one is really better at is like block damage, or excuse me, melee damage on bosses. It's just this one overall does more and really is pretty goated. Same thing with the knife. Best knife is block knife. Block weapons, especially on Vanguard, are super useful because our parry really isn't as valuable to us on this class over pretty much all the other ones because we have absurdly high contested health regen. And if you use the combo skip, which I'll try to plug the video in the corner here if I remember to. If I don't, you can check on my channel for the combo skip and how to do that with the Chainsword. Because the Chainsword combo skip with full throttle on top of swift recovery for heavy attacks restore 100% more contested health on all like your heavy attacks here. That combined with our 50% pretty much means as long as you're slapping hordes, like even Minora's hordes with this Chainsword and Vanguard, you just never die. But that is all I have to say about the Vanguard in this video. Hopefully you have a better understanding of his perk tree now, and I will go into his actual like weapon perks, some of his more niche builds at some point here. So if you like content like this, subscribe for more. And I also want to say thank you to all of my channel members. Your support means a ton. Peace, guys.